In the main character's past life, rumors were circulating everywhere that the ruler was looking for his missing daughter. This man, whom everyone called arrogant and rude, was also a liar. In fact, he was not looking for a daughter, but a replacement for her. A man who loves the beauty of greenery. Head of the estate, Duke Aubrey. It was he who met an unlucky end. And as a replacement, he found our main heroine. It turns out that the daughter disappeared when she was not even a year old. The girl doesn't understand how he knows that her daughter's voice sounds like a thrush. It seems that she was a true genius as a child. The Duke said that she should behave like his daughter. But the girl didn't understand what this meant at all. And he said that he would ask a couple of questions, and she should write down the answers. He treats her like she's some kind of orphan with no voice. She didn't understand what it was. He just gave her a blank piece of paper. Then the Duke said that she had better pass the test. Because if she can get through it, then she will live peacefully, like his reign, for the next 5 years. The girl was surprised that he said about 5 years, and the gentleman replied that she was naive. She had changed her mind, that she could replace his precious daughter for the rest of her life. Not really, but memories from a past life suggested that he only thought about himself. The girl said she just thought it was some kind of content. The gentleman said that she would have a couple of things to do, and after 5 years, he would send her to study abroad so that she would live in another country. It turns out that she will have to just play a role. It would be better if she went to an interview with the merchants. The Duke suggested starting an investigation. The first question asked her what her hobbies were, and the girl answered that she loved to read. Now she heard that she was quite educated, although you wouldn't say so, after which he asked how old she was. Our girl was 10, but his daughter was 11. The girl didn't understand why he was asking at all, since he was constantly interrupting her. This interrogation was what she had never had such an experience before. Now he told her to write the answers on a piece of paper, and she assumed that he was now going to give her a math problem. When he actually started saying something strange, the girl was shocked and didn't understand when this idiot would come to his senses. He said it was elementary, so she should solve it quickly, and didn't understand what she was staring at. The girl thought it was Mensa, but she didn't know what it was because she had never heard of it before. Although she thinks that she can solve the problem, so she decided to try and then thought about how she ended up here. To find the answer to this question, it is enough to look at her terrible life. Simply put, the main character was the subject of crazy experiments. Because of what was happening, her childhood memories simply disappeared, and she thought that he would always be her father, and she suffered until she was 24. The girl was just a vessel that contained the soul of this psycho's wife. Out of rage at the betrayal, the girl closed her eyes on the cold experiment table and thought she had died, but then opened her eyes and thought she was in heaven, but she had returned in time. And then she ended up in a shelter when that man sold her. She couldn't believe that this life would be even worse. Luckily, mad scientists regularly read the newspaper, so she knows about all the events in the next 10 years. Then she often saw this name on the pages: Duke Cabal Aubrey. He was the second most powerful man, and he controlled 50% of the empire's trade. He became the head of the family, overtaking his older brothers. Perhaps he was destined to become a ruthless man in order to survive in the treacherous ducal family. Then the Duke asked why she was staring and not deciding, and the girl said that she had already decided. The man was surprised. He thought he was cheating, but everyone knows that he is good to his wife and follows the ruler of the Blue Moon well. She has been having a strange feeling for a long time now. It seems that she knows many places that she has never even seen before. She also knows information about different people. This is possibly a side effect of the experiments. Then she heard his words of approval, and he remarked that he didn't even know how she managed to solve the problem in such a short time. The girl replied that she was simply a genius, and because of this, she even saw at least some joy in him. He noted that she barely managed, and that he was also quite smart. So he decided to adopt this girl. On the internet, that she is quite cute. The girl thought that he, of course, is far from handsome. Well, actually, it's even strange that she managed it. She doesn't understand why there were no interviews for the role of the Duchess's daughter in her past life. This death was painful and agonizing for her, and she even dreamed of dying quickly. She died and came back to life 3 months ago, but she woke up under a tree. She noticed the woman trying to tell Lana that adoption was an interesting event, but the girl didn't want to leave. The main character did not understand where she was now, and what was happening. They say that a person does not feel when he dies, but she experienced excruciating pain. She was sure that she was dead, but now she is alive. Looking around, she did not understand at all where she was. She could not see well. She had strange, painful feelings, and the girl's name was familiar to her, but she had never heard it before. The kind tones spoken to children, adopted by the nobility. Besides the lost memories, the orphanage was like hell. The skin began to peel off from her face, and because of the experiments, she felt pain even from a breath of wind. The smell of horrible drugs is worse than the rotting corpse, but now she has returned. Just recently she was in pain, but it all went away, long flowing hair, clear light skin, and cute fingers. She doesn't think she's dreaming now, and it seems she's finally free. In fact, she's been dreaming of freedom for a long time. So she started laughing. She couldn't believe that God was actually roasting over her. She was so happy and thought that this was really a chance to start all over again. Well, then she didn't understand what was going on. Something appeared on her hand, and she didn't understand what it was. She was simply horrified because she noticed traces of the experiment on her hands. She wanted to start all over again, so much she was willing to lose all her powers. The main reason why she died was that when the described ancient language takes over the whole body, it means that traces of incurable diseases lead to death. She thought she was finally back to normal life, but now she realizes she's finished. If she went back to the past, that means that this idiot is also alive but doesn't know about her yet. But she absolutely needs to take revenge. Now she simply cannot die alone. Because of this, she will ruin his life. She needs to prove herself and get a letter of recommendation. The most famous orphanage in the empire has its own secret. Children who get good grades can live under the protection of the nobility. The rest are poor students or simply not liked by teachers. These children then disappear under the pretext of having found a family. It must be for the same reason as the main character. She needs to get more good grades. She can't be stupid anymore. And then she will definitely be able to take revenge. Everyone was in complete shock when the girl told the teacher that the dishes were washed and stayed to cook and put away the groceries. She asked if she could help with anything else, but the teacher said that Anissa could already walk. The woman was surprised that she had coped so quickly, and the girl said that she was grateful and would try to help the teachers in everything. The woman was shocked because this girl was working in the kitchen for the first time. It's amazing that she's doing so well. She always got bad grades, and she couldn't believe that she could change so much in a couple of months. In her past life, she reacted differently because the girl remembers this teacher, and the woman has already started thinking about taking this girl to the kitchen regularly. She was the one who gave most of the grades, and in this case, she decided to thank this woman with a smile on her face. This woman will also be included in the list, along with the main character. Even if she goes to a difficult lesson, it shouldn't be difficult because she's used to it. She cooked and cleaned. I lived to gain acceptance of a mad scientist. Just the thought of it lifts me down. Therefore, she will definitely take revenge. But when she was in her own, of course, she accidentally hit someone. She asked for forgiveness from the gentleman she accidentally hit. He didn't understand what it was and called her a slut. The girl got angry, and the man was shocked that she just apologized, and that's it. And he started saying that she looks like she'll say the same thing when she kills a person. It seems like she really thinks that she can even talk to him on equal terms. But the girl said that she thought he could, and then he asked if she even knew who he was. The girl replied that it was true, and he had secured the support of Countess Charlotte. The system of maintenance is a system in an orphanage in which the honor of the noble sponsor increases as payments are made. The guy asked again if she even knew his name. He wasn't such a fool as to mess around with her. Well, the girl told him to be careful because the Count is a ruthless killer. He better go, otherwise he might be next. He was in total. I asked what he was talking about. She looked like she wanted to die and said he was going to punch her in the lips. The girl said that he could in principle try to do this. He became very angry, but when he tried to hit her, he heard someone calling him. The woman asked what Peter was doing now and said she couldn't believe he was such a rude person. The girl knew it was a lie. They only paid attention because the case involved a child for support. He tried to say that everything was wrong, and she understood that this was probably why they came running. And also she saw that there was a man with green hair there. They must not want to appear in front of this man, because he is noble. She watched his every move carefully, noting how carefully he stepped. It was important to her that Peter make no mistake in front of such an important person. She could not allow him to slip up at this crucial moment. The situation was clearly not going in their favor. The teacher, realizing this, decided to turn to Anissa. The girl quickly responded, assuring everyone that she was fine, although in reality, she was a little tense. If she could get support, she would be able to put them in their place herself. The girl was sure that she would be able to prove her importance, but for this, she had to wait for the right moment. The teacher asked her to come with her for a while, which caught Anissa off guard. She did not understand why this was necessary and was clearly confused, trying to guess what exactly was being discussed. When the teacher introduced her to the man, the girl felt fear wash over her. Her palms became sweaty, and her heart began to beat faster because she understood that this moment would decide a lot. She couldn't fully comprehend what was happening. Of course, she knew this day would come, but she didn't expect it to happen so soon, and under such awkward circumstances. Now she was absolutely sure that the first impression was already hopelessly ruined. It seemed to her that everything had gone wrong, and there was no chance to fix the situation. However, Anissa quickly pulled herself together. She did not allow fear to get the better of her. She maintained her composure and greeted him with due respect, as befits her. The girl smiled, deciding that if he had already seen how she was being treated here, then all she could do was maintain her dignity. She knew it was better not to show her true emotions now. His reaction was cold and reserved, which made her think perhaps she shouldn't have expected anything more from him, and her attempts to win him over were in vain. The man asked who had taught her such good manners, and the teacher was quick to answer. She explained that nobles often took such children as pages or governesses, which helped them learn etiquette. It seemed that her first impression of him was wrong. Suddenly, he showed interest and asked how exactly the girl guessed that he was a man of noble birth. He simply has a commanding tone, and his cloak is also made of very expensive fabric, but she cannot tell him this. So she said he just had a graceful walk and a beautiful voice. He said she couldn't notice the graceful walk even when he was wearing a cloak and the beauty of his voice before he spoke. She flattered him, hoping that he could be an adoptive father, but he turned out to be very disgusting. However, she liked his violet eyes. They are mysterious and beautiful. By the way, she said that he had a meeting with a potential adoptive parent, and it seems she already knew in advance. The teacher said that it was impolite to keep the distinguished guest waiting, so they would be leaving already. When they entered the room, the teacher said to sit down. They would bring tea now, and she also asked for congratulations to introduce him to their student. The girl seized the teacher Irina. For the first time, she picked her up so passionately. It seems like she really is such an important person. The gentleman said that he already knew her name, so he asked the teacher to leave. The woman asked again because she needed to consult him about adoption. The man asked with disdain. I also told her that he was going to adopt her. He would make this decision, so he asked to leave them. The girl sees for the first time that someone has so disciplined their arrogant teacher. She loves to divide students into favorites and despised. She is the most disgusting of teachers, and she is terribly proud of her work. The teacher clearly singled her out from the other kids, but not in a good way. She picked on her, humiliated her in front of the class, made her feel worthless. It just seemed impossible to tolerate such treatment. Suddenly, the teacher came closer and unexpectedly hugged her like a caring mentor. But her words did not sound so gentle. The girl was strictly ordered not to embarrass herself in front of an important guest. However, it was said quietly, almost in a whisper. The teacher wanted the girl to understand that her unexpected kindness was just a mask behind which a threat was hidden. It is easiest to take out anger on someone who is weaker, and the teacher took advantage of this. Her behavior had a simple explanation. The girl was a convenient target for humiliation. The girl answered with restraint that she would try. But inside, she was already filled with anger. This woman had irritated her for a long time, and now, even more. The teacher added that if she needed anything, she would be outside the door. But the girl understood that she shouldn't expect help from her. Anissa decided that the best tactic was to simply be a good girl. Maybe that would keep her out of trouble, because sometimes obedience is the key to peace. But deep down, she knew they would see what she was capable of. She would smile, but that smile would only be the harbinger of her revenge. At that moment, a male voice rang out, irritated and commanding. It brought her back to reality. She had to act nice as she had planned. The man took off his coat. He seemed unpleasant to her, but it wasn't her fault that he was like that. She just had to play her part. He offered her a seat, and the girl smiled sweetly, agreeing. Everything had to look natural, so as not to arouse suspicion. But then she noticed his appearance. Long green hair, rare violet eyes. Such a combination was rare. Besides, he was really handsome. But there was something about his gaze that was alarming. Why was he looking at her like that? There was something in that gaze that she couldn't understand. The man chuckled and assumed that she probably thought he was a disgusting villain. He watched her reaction. Now she was caught. He could end her suffering, or turn it into something even more painful. He was witty, sarcastic, and had a nasty character. That was how Anissa first met the damn Duke Chagall Aubrey. She feels bad that he will really just take her away from here. She understands how to process the documents, and how to go through a month of special training for adoption. When they were sitting in the carriage, the man thought she was disappointed, but the girl replied that this was not so. He did not even give her time to think about it. After all, he could have given her time to get used to the idea that she would be adopted. Obviously, it will end soon. If not then, its family will die out. Anyway, it's like they're playing with a time bomb who will die first. But now she decided to think about who should die. She remembered that after his wife died of illness, he looked for something to drown his grief in and took part in the royal hunt. He missed and cast many into a member of the imperial family, and any people's just ruler, Alf Agro, was killed by Duke Aubrey. After this, the magic of the Aubrey family was banned in the empire, and the family was executed always alone. But then the main character of color, and the heiress of the Aubrey family, appears with the same magical ability. Well, here she started thinking, what kind of main character could there be? After all, this is not some kind of Roman. But perhaps this is the result of an experiment. After what was done at the bottom, some strange things are constantly happening. Now some kind of voiceover has appeared. Or maybe she has developed some kind of gift of foresight. It's funny, but she experienced death and rebirth again. However, the effects of the experiment still make themselves felt, as if they left an invisible mark on her. Because of this, she didn't have much time left. The Duke looked at her carefully, assessing the situation and her current state. He noticed that her name was Anissa and said it out loud. The girl nodded, confirming that it was indeed so. He then suggested that she learn the rules of their family before they arrived. She, of course, did not refuse such an opportunity. The first and foremost rule was that her name was no longer Anissa. Now she will be called Annette Aubrey. This name will become a new reality for her. The man left her no choice, and now she must get used to it. When they finally got there, the man showed her the house she would be spending the next 5 years in. The building looked impressive, but that didn't make it any cozier. Aubrey's estate lay before her, luxurious, surrounded by greenery, and completely out of keeping with her life up to that point. The girl's attention was drawn to a stranger with pink hair. She didn't know who it was, but she clearly understood that she played some important role. The stranger looked excited, almost to tears, and suddenly exclaimed that she was her baby. This unexpected outburst only increased her confusion. Apparently, it was Rosanna, the woman she was to call her future stepmother. The thought seemed strange, but there was no point in resisting. She was destined to be the first victim when trouble came for the Aubrey family. It seemed inevitable, even though she didn't know when it would happen. The man was clearly nervous, afraid that she might give herself away. His gaze was intense, and his movements were too abrupt. Perhaps he really thought she could forget everything he had been telling her all along the way. But she remembered, and she knew she couldn't make mistakes. Tell him, he said, that she should forget her previous name and call him differently. From the moment they arrive at the estate, she will call him Dad. Surely she will immediately meet his wife, so she must call her mother. And she must also swear that somewhere now and forever, she will play the role of his daughter. This is a very unusual request. She also asked where his real daughter was, to which he replied that he managed to find her, but she was dead, and he would never dare tell his wife about it. But now he told her not to ask any more questions about it. They still have their own oracle. If she needs help, she can contact her. She knows that Anissa is his daughter to me, and he also told her not to forget that from now on, she will be the only heir of the family. In principle, yes, if she is herself, then she will have a direct road back to the orphans. He also told her that her girl was smart and naive and kind. He was like that in childhood. She took after him. Now, the dilemma is how a girl who lived so many years in a Syrian orphanage should react how to convince her parents again at home. The woman met the girl with trembling lips and eyes shining with tears. Her hands were shaking slightly, but despite her excitement, she took a step forward. However, the little girl immediately hid behind the Duke's back, as if afraid of what awaited her. Looking at the crying woman, the girl also felt tears welling up in her eyes. She sobbed and, not daring to take a step forward, quietly asked, "Is this really her mother?" There was uncertainty in her voice, because there was too much that was unclear. The Duke began to get nervous. He had expected anything, but it was definitely not that the little girl would pay attention to such details. His gaze darted from the girl to the woman, and he realized that this was the moment of truth for the child. The girl who had lived through so many trials could not simply rejoice at the meeting. She was afraid of new disappointment, afraid of being unnecessary again. Deep down in her soul, there was hope, but fear prevented her from taking the first step. She could be confused and frightened by the unfamiliar luxury around her. Surrounded by unfamiliar faces and majestic halls, she sought support from someone she already knew. The Duke was the only person she knew, and this gave her confidence. However, she did not want to play someone else's role. Lying to herself and others was unpleasant. She did not like to pretend, even if it could make the situation easier. The woman tried to come closer, her voice trembling with emotion. With pleading eyes, she said that she really was her mother, and called the girl by her name. Annette. She told him how long she had been looking for her, how she had hoped that this day would come. Her voice broke as she begged him to let her hug her daughter just once. Her pain was genuine, and there was not a drop of falsehood in it. The girl couldn't hold back any longer. Tears poured from her eyes, and she threw herself into her mother's arms. The woman gasped with happiness, hugging the baby tightly. She couldn't believe that this moment had finally arrived. The woman hugged the girl tightly, tenderly, as if she was afraid of losing her again. The warmth of her mother's arms enveloped the little girl, but something inside was troubling her. Perhaps because she has no right to someone else's mother's biotech. Perhaps she can't separate herself from the memories of pain and tears. Whatever the case, she must never allow it to happen again. The Duke turned to Rosanna and said that she was probably embarrassed by them for now. Then the main character realized that she really had not squeezed out a tear in vain. The gentleman said that while his wife was going to her room, he would show her the room because his wife had not yet recovered. The main character could not even imagine that he could speak in such a gentle voice. The mother looked at the girl with a gentle smile, and noticing her tiredness, told her to go to her room to rest a little. She expressed the hope that by dinner, her daughter would still come out and join them. The little girl nodded confidently, promising that she would definitely come when the time came. Then one of the maids came up to her, gently supported her by the shoulder, and helped her slowly head to the chambers. The Duke looked at Annette carefully. His voice was stern, but not harsh. He wanted to understand her condition, and asked directly if it was true that she was crying now. However, the girl, not at all embarrassed, immediately declared that this was not true. With a slight smile, she added that she was simply pretending, playing out a scene. She then noted that his daughter, she thought, was smart but naive and kind, and now taking care of her was her new responsibility. The Duke frowned in surprise, thinking it sounded like some kind of report, but he soon gave the order to let everyone know. His daughter had finally returned home. He demanded that the servants watch her closely, surround her with care, and protect her as if she were the most precious jewel. The servants, hearing these words, were sincerely happy because they were pleased to see their mistress again after such a long absence. The Duke looked at the girl and did not understand why she was so surprised. If she was here, then this was her home. Although she shouldn't have her hopes up, the situation itself is an incredible stroke of luck that not everyone gets to experience. True, this period will last only 5 years, so it would be reckless to hope for anything more. The maids greeted the lady warmly, addressing her with joy. They introduced themselves as Mary and Gold, sincerely glad to see her in their home. The girl did not expect to meet them so quickly. She decided that she would still try to stay away from the Duke so as not to interfere in his affairs. It was important for her to follow the instructions, no matter what happened. The main thing was not to create unnecessary problems and not to attract unnecessary attention to herself. The maids suggested addressing them as you, which greatly embarrassed the girl. She did not know how to react to such closeness in communication. Overall, it was a new beginning for her. However, the point of being dressed was completely incomprehensible to her, and she began to protest. The maids were shocked by her decision. The girl said that she could dress herself, which caused them bewilderment and great confusion. The Duke was not yet aware of what was happening, and the maids tried to gently explain that they needed to help the mistress with her bath. But the girl was adamant she was not going to agree and did not know what to do, because if she took off her clothes, she would certainly be caught. The girl nevertheless admitted that she felt very awkward and looked at them with pity as if apologizing for her inconvenience. Her eyes expressed embarrassment. They offered to at least bring her some water, promising to wait in the room without going far. They were ready to help so that she would not feel lonely. The lady was trying to say that she would prefer to dress herself without anyone else's help. She did not want to be disturbed at such a private moment. She explained that she could not share the secret with the Duke, because if he found out, she would be immediately excommunicated, and she would lose the chance to be near him. She felt that there was no point in dwelling on such a miserable defect that could put her life at risk at any moment, if it was not corrected. Now she had a chance to get rid of the problem, but to do that, she had to find another solution. This excuse wouldn't work when she started living with him. The chameleon slime was a unique invention created by some scientist who was striving for genius in his developments. If you stick it to your skin, it will change color to match your skin tone, so the marks will be invisible, and no one will notice the damage. Many people bought this slime to cover up burns and scars, making them invisible. The girl thought that with this, she could hide the marks. But the problem was that this thing had not been invented yet, and it did not exist yet, although she needed it now. She couldn't wait for several years as the situation required an urgent solution. She dreamed of getting slime, at least within 6 months. She needed to find this scientist and persuade him to speed up. Luckily, she knew him well and could use her connections. This scientist was eccentric, almost crazy, but recognized as a genius of his time. He was known for his unusual views and discoveries. Because of his narcissism, she was able to learn what he liked and what disgusted him. This knowledge gave her an advantage in dealing with him. She suspected that he might be prepared for her trick. At that moment, the maids came to see if she had finished and if she had any trouble washing herself alone. The girl replied that she would prefer to walk around the estate because she was tired and wanted to rest in her room and enjoy some privacy. However, she decided that she wanted to get used to the estate faster, so she went for a walk. As soon as she looked around, it was already evening. The maids informed her that everything would soon be ready and advised her to hurry so that she could have time to prepare for dinner. The estate was so large that even in a whole day it was impossible to see all its corners and enjoy every detail of it. Mother addressed Annette in a soft tone, and the girl answered her with a slight smile, not hiding her friendliness and warmth. The mother looked at the girl with interest and asked if she liked the food. In response, she smiled happily and said enthusiastically that it was incredibly delicious, better than she could have expected. In her past life, she had to eat only through IVs, and in the orphanage, the food was always simple and served to everyone at once without individual portions. Hearing that the girl liked it, the mother noticeably perked up and offered to try the dessert, assuring her that it was very sweet and that she would definitely like it. As soon as the girl tried the dessert, she was completely delighted. It was so delicious that she could not contain her joy. Although she understood that she would not be able to eat every last crumb, she suddenly thought, if she could eat like this all her life, her fate would have turned out differently. At that moment, the mother, slightly embarrassed, but sincere, asked the girl to call her mom. She knew that the girl was smart beyond her years, and now she wanted to at least make up for the lost time a little to become a real mother to her. It would be wonderful if the girl could call her Mama. At least sometimes. These words touched the child deeply, and overcoming slight excitement, she said the cherished word. The girl looked at her seriously and said that she would try to get used to calling her mom. She sincerely thanked them for all the efforts and searches that brought her to this house. The Duke was stunned. He even felt his heart skip a beat. It was so unexpected that he almost lost the power of speech. There was surprise in his eyes, but the girl didn't understand what had caused such a reaction. She simply did what she thought was necessary. He kept his eyes on his wife, obviously thinking about something important. The girl couldn't understand what exactly he was thinking about, but she felt tension in the air. And then there was a loud scream. The girl turned around and saw something that perhaps she shouldn't have seen. The Duke shouted Rosanna's name, calling for her to come to her senses, and then gave a sharp order to take her to her room before things got worse. But everything turned out to be much more serious than the girl initially thought. It was surprising that she had not yet lost consciousness from shock. She saw the despair in the Duke's eyes and knew she had to do something. It was impossible to just stand by and watch. The girl did not know how to properly treat this disease, but quickly realized that hot water and sugar could help and asked Mary to prepare them. She also remembered that there was a way to ease the condition a little. She ordered to roast rye grains, dry them, and then grind them into flour. Rye! It is a simple but extremely important ingredient in the treatment of many ailments. Although it was not a panacea, the girl knew that it could play an important role in saving a life. To heal, you need to use just a little bit. Then there will be an immediate calming effect. The maid said that she would prepare it now. Now was the perfect time to stage a flood, and the main character decided to carry out this plan without hesitation. She knew for sure that her actions would lead to the desired result. The Duke looked at Rosanna attentively and asked if she really felt better. The lady nodded calmly, confirming that she felt much better than before. However, she couldn't get rid of the thought that Annette would probably be very scared. In addition, she was sure that she would not be able to be a good mother to the girl, and this worried her. The Duke was visibly alarmed by her words. He could not allow her to think that way about herself, and he firmly ordered her never to say such a thing again. But as soon as he turned away, he heard the girl calling her mother. There was an urgency in her voice that made him stop. Annette proudly announced that she had brought medicine for her mother. She was sure that it would help her recover faster. The Duke looked at the child in surprise, not understanding what she was talking about. Then he explained in a reserved manner that the mother was ill now, and therefore it was better for the girl to leave. However, Annette did not even think of leaving. She confidently walked up to her mother, not paying attention to the Duke's words, and insistently offered her to take the medicine. The Duke was confused. He frowned and asked sharply what she was doing, why she was acting so self-confident and not asking permission. He couldn't understand where she got so much courage from, and at that moment he realized that the girl was completely unaware of her place. Her behavior was too bold. But then he noticed that she was smiling, and this confused him even more. What did this smile mean? Why wasn't she afraid of his anger? Annette calmly replied that everything was fine, because she had inherited her intelligence from her father. She said this with such ease that the Duke involuntarily thought about it. The mother was touched by her daughter's concern. It was the first time she had seen her show such sincere concern, and she could not refuse her this. She looked at the Duke and said softly that there was no point in being so angry. Everything was fine, and there was no need to attach so much importance to it. She then took the medicine, noting that it was sweeter than she expected, although there was a slight bitterness to the taste. Annetta said with a smile that she hoped for her mother's speedy recovery, but for now it would be better for her to rest. The girl turned around and headed for the exit. The Duke stood there lost in thought. He couldn't shake the feeling that she had some sort of plan. Perhaps she was up to something. As she walked out the door, Annette breathed a sigh of relief. The Duke's words were still ringing in her head, but she knew she had done the right thing. She understood that now she was in no danger. At least they wouldn't experiment on her. She did everything she could, and that was the main thing. Her goal was to help, and she knew everything would be okay. She wasn't in a lab. She didn't have to be afraid anymore. Everything would work out as it should. But suddenly, a maid called out to her. This unexpected voice took her by surprise, and she shuddered with fear. She quickly realized that it was better for her to appear innocent and harmless in front of them, like a child, so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicion and avoid unnecessary problems. So she smiled broadly, pretending to be surprised. She added that it was the first time she heard adults scolding her, but it would remain their little secret. She knew she must not show any fear. At that moment, Rosanna turned to her husband and asked him why he was so angry with his daughter, since it had been so difficult to find her. The Duke replied that it was not the fact of her disappearance that worried him, but the fact that his wife was feeding the girl something strange. However, Rosanna objected, reminding him that she was simply caring for her. He admitted that it was indeed commendable. He was just not used to such displays of concern. But despite this, he shouldn't act so coldly. She sensed his attitude softening a little, and was relieved to know that he had heard her. The Duke, though somewhat irritated, admitted that he had understood. Then, he suddenly noticed that the cough that had been tormenting the girl seemed to have completely stopped, which caused him genuine surprise. Rosanna thought about it and honestly admitted that she hadn't noticed it herself. Moreover, she noted that the unpleasant chill in her body had also disappeared. They were both stunned. The girl had never recovered from her illness so quickly before, which was astonishing. The lady couldn't understand how it happened. Perhaps it was just a coincidence, but whatever it was, it really worked. He suddenly remembered that there was some confidence on the girl's face. This confidence was noticeable in her gaze and manner of speaking, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. But he could not bring himself to say that everything was really that simple, because much remained unclear. So he turned to Pedro for advice, hoping for his opinion. He asked her to bring Mary and Golda, and said that it would be necessary to get the opinions of these women. This was important for understanding the next steps. He needed to find out if she noticed anything strange or unusual that might explain the girl's behavior. He said they couldn't just rest until they got answers. He also reminded her that she should apologize to her daughter for everything that happened, and this would be important for restoring the relationship between them. He understood that this method could not suit either him or the child. Any attempts to solve the problem with this approach could lead to even greater misunderstanding. But maybe this girl really does have the power to help Rosanne. Maybe she could heal her, and that could be the turning point. Rosanna was perfectly healthy until one event happened that changed her life dramatically. If it hadn't happened, everything could have been different. About 10 years ago, the Empire began to experience riots that led to chaos. Factions opposed to the nobility began to fight for power and influence in the state. The reason was the emperor's thoughtless policies. His reign was destructive because the previous emperor was known as one of the worst despots in history. Wasteful and corrupt, he not only governed poorly, but was also constantly striving for war, which further worsened the situation in the empire. Commoners were mobilized into the army to make up for the shortage of soldiers. When finances became scarce, the emperor raised taxes, which further exacerbated the crisis. The nobles could not resist the emperor and were forced to follow his instructions, even if it was contrary to their interests. Everything happened according to his laws, and they could not change anything. Eventually, the people could not stand the oppression and rebellions began. The eastern regions became the center of the struggle for freedom and justice. The wars did not stop, taxes became higher and higher, and the nobles tried with all their might to subjugate the people. But for the people, there was nothing valuable anymore, and they were ready to fight to the end. Some nobles resorted to public beheadings of peasants to pacify them. Rebellion broke out throughout the country, and the peasants' thirst for revenge could no longer be stopped. This resulted in a wave of kidnappings of noble children, and the peasants justified this by saying that since their children were being killed, they would also take children from the aristocracy. The number of kidnapped children continued to grow, and soon this terrible fate touched the Aubrey family. This prediction came true, touching their lives. The Aubrey family had a nanny who served them faithfully for many years, without any troubles. But one day her son suddenly disappeared on the day the landowner visited the estate. The Duke was shocked. He could not imagine that this woman who served faithfully and truly could be involved in the kidnapping. The next terrible event was the murder of the son of a marquis. The marquis, overcome with anger, incited the nobles to revolt, and the emperor, only 16 years old, was killed. The entire empire was on the brink of destruction. The anger of the people, together with the fury of the nobles, formed a powerful alliance that overthrew the damned government. This was the beginning of a new era for the country. After the tragic death of the emperor, children began to return to their noble parents, hoping for the restoration of justice and peace. However, among those who did not return was his daughter. He could not forget how long he had hoped for her return. But unfortunately, she was no longer there. The son of the Argo family also did not return. But fortunately, young Argo was found and returned home. This was a huge relief for the entire family. When Rosanna learned that young Argo had been found alive, her heart was filled with joy. She felt long-awaited relief and hope like never before. This gave her new opportunities for hope. She thought that perhaps their daughter was out there somewhere still alive. But despite all his hopes, he found it difficult to tell his wife the truth, because he was told that only the charred body of their daughter had been found. He learned that she had been burned, and that the only way to identify her was by the necklace they had once given their daughter. It was unbearable. He didn't know how to tell this to his wife, how to break such terrible news, because he didn't want her heart to break from pain. He couldn't imagine how she would survive such grief, especially after the first sign of joy had appeared on her face. He decided to keep it a secret, so that she wouldn't have to go through the same thing he did. It might be too painful for her. Instead of telling her the truth, he brought home a girl with green hair. She looked like their daughter, but it couldn't be her. The girl was the same age as their daughter, but it wasn't hers. He felt like it wasn't what he was looking for so badly. If he could really find his daughter and bring her back, everything would be completely different. He dreamed about it, but he didn't know how. Perhaps her eyes would have been as golden as this girl's, but he knew that they were not. This girl was not their daughter. He saw that this girl looked like him, but he knew that she couldn't be their daughter. He was sure that their child would be completely different. Annette had light violet eyes like his. He knew that eyes like those couldn't just disappear and that they wouldn't change. This only happens when a person becomes the subject of experiments, but he could not believe it. The gentleman asked incredulously whether this tea was really made from rye grains and sugar. It seemed strange to him that such a simple drink was served in his house, and he wanted to make sure that he had not misheard. He still couldn't believe that in front of him was really just water infused with rye grains with added sugar. It seemed too modest a treat, but the maids had already confirmed this fact, and he had no reason to doubt it. Trying to understand the meaning of what was happening, he decided that perhaps it was some kind of folk remedy. The maids, exchanging a few glances, said that the little mistress had already returned to her chambers and was now resting. However, with slight excitement, they added that they did not want to seem rude, but the girl looked frightened, as if something unusual had happened. One of the maids added cautiously that the young mistress had confessed that her father had never raised his voice to her before. It was so unexpected for her that she seemed confused. The Duke was irritated, not even understanding what kind of day it was. Something had clearly thrown him off track, and the gloomy expression on his face only confirmed his inner discontent. Suddenly, as if to distract himself from his thoughts, he ordered the servants to tell him what children usually liked. There was no usual severity in his voice. Rather, there was a tired thoughtfulness. Meanwhile, the girl was about to write a letter to that disgusting scientist, but Cabal unexpectedly disrupted her plans by literally showering her with a mountain of all sorts of cakes. She looked at her father in complete bewilderment and asked why she needed so many sweets. The Duke only shrugged his shoulders indifferently, noting that he had simply decided to buy them without any particular reason. The girl couldn't get over her surprise. Where did he even get the cakes in the middle of the night? However, instead of answering, her father suddenly asked how she was feeling, looking closely at her face. Having pulled herself together, the girl said with a smile that she was fine. She was more concerned about whether her father was really angry with her, because this had never happened before. It all sounded like some kind of tsundere behavior. Although there was no point in thinking about it for long, her maids were supposed to arrive soon, and the conversation would probably end on its own. Suddenly, the girl looked at her father more seriously, realizing that perhaps she should not just act like a daughter, but show herself to be more mature. She smiled and said that she was incredibly grateful to him, and that she also loved cakes. She added that he was the best dad in the world. The Duke froze for a moment, but the girl, without noticing this, cheerfully declared that she would certainly eat every last piece. He should not worry, because he was the best father. Her happiness was genuine, and she sincerely said how lucky she was to have such a wonderful dad. He is not only the smartest, but also the best person she knows. A few more seconds, and the flow of delight continued. She enthusiastically said that her father always takes care of her. He is the head of the family, and the best in the whole wide world. At some point, she decided that was enough. She would never have thought that everything would be so simple. She had so much energy after the cakes that sleep seemed to disappear completely. As a result, she spent the whole night without sleep, full of strength and emotions. Right now, her powers are clearly not enough to establish contact with this mad scientist. Apparently, her capabilities are simply not enough yet, and no tricks will help contact him. It looks like she'll have to turn to the Duke. She's been in his domain for a long time, but she still can't manage her life the way she used to. She doesn't have any money either, and without it, it will be impossible to deal with this scientist. So first, she needs to get his research by any means necessary. His developments mention a completely new method of working with magical stones. Usually, such a stone has only one property. For example, if you fill it with fire energy, it becomes a firestone. However, with certain manipulations, it is possible to achieve that the same stone absorbs two different properties at once, which was considered impossible. If, for example, a firestone were combined with a water stone, the result would be a new mineral capable of creating scalding water. This discovery could bring enormous benefits. To achieve what she wants, she needs to win the Duke's trust. If he sees her as a valuable ally, she can pitch him her business idea. Moreover, she is treated well here, and she would repay him in kind. She always considered herself a genius. However, at that moment, when she was walking down the corridor, someone unexpectedly tripped her. She didn't have time to react and fell to the floor with a loud crash. As it turned out, it was the maids who did it, who were standing nearby and watching her fall. She didn't understand what was going on. The girls came up to her, but instead of apologizing, they only noted that she had stumbled carelessly and should watch her step more carefully in the future. Moreover, they brazenly stated that she should learn to behave properly if she wanted to be respected. They discussed her situation with irony, certain that she would not be able to cope with even this simple matter. She was lucky after all. Not every orphan is so fortunate. They would not have refused to be in her place and become adopted children of noble people. It seems that this house is losing all its value to her. Offers from other families are already coming in, and now she only has to choose among the more influential owners. The thought of serving a dirty commoner disgusts her. Wherever she goes, she meets such vile bullies. They are just waiting for her nerves to break. The worst thing is that they are grown women, but they behave like children. Their behavior irritates her. The girl calmly stated that it didn't hurt. In response, they pretended to apologize, but she just grinned and suggested that they tell her directly whether she really smelled bad. The maid hastened to assure that there was no unpleasant smell. Then the girl warned that she would definitely tell her father about everything. The women were taken aback by such impudence. She immediately noted that they had just said that they had already received offers from other families. So she would simply convey to her father their desire to leave. Let him know that they do not want to serve a homeless orphan and are looking for new masters. After that, she asked them if they were really unhappy with their jobs. The women looked at each other and noted that her father would most likely be angry with her for saying such things. They were sure that she was the only one to blame for everything. Since she didn't look where she was going, that meant there was nothing to complain about. And this blackmail didn't surprise them. They had heard worse words from the mad scientist. The girl turned to them and stated with cold confidence that they seemed to really believe they could intimidate her. Who should love her anyway? Is it the duty of a butler or a head maid? Maybe it is the duty of a common maid. Of course, all this sounds ridiculous and far from the truth. The only people who should really have warm feelings for her are the Duke and Duchess Aubrey. When the lady heard their words, she asked again if they seriously thought they could deceive her so easily. After all, her father personally brought her here, and now these people dare to doubt him? It seems that they are not only doubting the girl, but also questioning the words of the Duke himself. However, she is not stupid and understands perfectly well what is happening. Therefore, she directly stated that she will definitely tell her father about everything. And he is not so easy to fool, and even more so, it will not be possible to deceive. They had better stop their weird antics, because her mother loves her, and her father would never hate his own daughter. In response to this, the girls only sarcastically asked who said that she was really his daughter. But the girl did not back down. She asked again, did they really dare to doubt the Duke himself? And then calmly added that she would tell him everything. After all, her parents are very worried about her. They will do everything to protect her, and then it will only remain to be seen who will end up worse off. When she turned around, the The maids looked at each other and realized they had gone too far. They tried to smooth things over and quickly apologized, but it was clear to the girl. They seemed to think that she would easily change her mind. If they decided to apologize, they should at least try to do it sincerely. So she just smiled and asked curiously why they suddenly had such happy faces. This smile irritated them to the depths of their souls. I wanted to say everything they thought directly, or even spit out of anger. The girl just shrugged. Was it so hard to apologize? Or would she have to teach them how to do it herself? She was already bored of looking at them. The women were still seething with anger, but in the end, they reluctantly apologized. Then the girl, as if nothing had happened, smiled again, accepted their apologies, and in a completely calm tone, announced that she would now go and tell her father everything. The maids turned pale with horror, but the girl only calmly reminded them that she had not forgiven them at all. She had only taught them how to apologize properly. Overall, the work these guys did was quite decent. She was even willing to admit that they tried, and perhaps could praise them. Maybe she will even forgive them, but only on one condition. Every time they see her, they must drop to one knee as a sign of respect. Of course, she said it as a joke. If you take her words seriously, you might think that she is an arrogant bore. But it is easier for her to just scare them a little and move on peacefully. At least now she has the confidence that they won't bother her, at least in the near future. Meanwhile, the chef, noticing the girl, asked with curiosity what brought her to the kitchen. In response, she asked with a degree of surprise whether they really recognized her here, since she hadn't even had time to introduce herself. The guy standing next to her chuckled and explained that, of course, he knew who she was. After all, he wasn't just a cook, he was the assistant chef of the estate. The girl thought, most likely Duke Aubrey warned him about her in advance. Or perhaps he guessed it himself. Because if you believe the novel, the Duke respects hard-working people. And then her thoughts jumped to something else. What novel? Where did these strange words and fragments of phrases come from in her head? But now was clearly not the time to figure this out. Instead, she decided to ask the question, could she use the kitchen for a while? However, the guy immediately made it clear that it was not that simple. Then the girl, smiling slightly slyly, proposed a deal. She would tell them the secret of preparing high-quality meat from cheap ingredients. This method was brought back by a delegation of barbarians who attended a conference about 3 years ago. To this day, no one in the Empire knows about it. If she can surprise the Duke with food, it will be easier to get the initial funds. For some reason, she feels like she needs to impress him. Everything around was quiet, as if nature had frozen before an approaching storm. The girl felt the tension, because her father had given her the opportunity to prove something important. Realizing that she had done wrong, the girl asked for forgiveness, with sincere regret. Then, gathering her courage, she added that she would like to bring him something. At this time, the servant, with his usual politeness, asked the gentleman if he would like to take a short break and have a bite to eat. The gentleman just grinned and noted that Pedro always appeared just when he was about to rest. Hearing this, the girl looked resolutely at her father and said that she had prepared the food, especially for him, hoping that he would agree to try it. These words made the Duke think he realized that her appearance that time was not accidental. She did not come just like that, but with a specific purpose. As Aubrey walked down the hallway, he noticed the scene unfolding before his eyes. He couldn't believe that the maids were allowing themselves to behave so brazenly, going beyond what was permitted. If the girl had simply been bullied, he would have intervened, of course. But she had used his name to scare the bullies, and that made him think, after all, she had come with a complaint. All she had to do was say a word, and there would be no trace left of those who dared to harm her. He was sure that her offer of food was nothing more than an attempt to bribe him, a kind of bribe that he had never expected. However, when he caught a whiff of the aroma coming from the dish, he was truly amazed by what he smelled. The Duke was stunned when he saw the dish prepared by Tsveteva in front of him. It was stewed beef, and he was surprised not by the dish itself, but by the fact that it looked unusual and appetizing. For some reason, the chef decided to deviate from the usual standard recipes and prepared something special. This immediately caught his attention and aroused his interest. He suddenly realized that he must have accidentally missed a meal. The aroma of the food was so appetizing that it awakened his hunger, making him eagerly pick up his fork. When he took his first bite, he was in for a real shock. He expected something ordinary, but instead he found that the dish did not have the unpleasant taste that he did not like in beef. The Duke couldn't believe that meat could be so soft and tender. He became curious about how long the chef had had this recipe and why he had never tried it before. It seemed that this dish had been prepared with special care, and he guessed that this was not just a culinary experiment. Most likely someone had specifically asked for it to be prepared this way. While thinking about this, the Duke noticed that there was another dish on the table. It was a berry pie in which he immediately recognized his favorite combination: blueberries, strawberries, and bilberries. This surprised him even more, because he knew that only Rosanna knew about his preferences in desserts. Even the chef was not aware of his love for berries. He suggested that perhaps Rosanne had passed this information on to the child, but he knew that she wouldn't worry about such details for him. In the end, the Duke decided that it was just a strange coincidence. Although he had his doubts, he saw nothing intentional in it. Besides, if his daughter had really been dating Rosanna, he would have been informed about it long ago. He couldn't just ignore this point. Since things had turned out that way, he made a decision. Since the child had brought him a treat, so be it. He asked Pedro to serve tea to finish the meal. "Everything is for the best. I would like to ask about the tea that the child gave his wife yesterday, but first I need to find out why she came." However, it was obvious anyway. The Duke couldn't help but notice that his daughter had the same decency as he did. It was nice to realize that. He was almost certain that the girl had come to him for a reason. Most likely she had some request, and she was going to voice it. The girl was surprised that her intentions were so easily read. She did not expect the Duke to guess right away, and a little embarrassed, she admitted that she wanted to ask something. "Of course we're talking about firing the maid." "Well, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. If the girl insists, it means she has good reasons for it. It would be sad if that happened again." She noted that she had uncovered a great secret while studying, and she asked if they could commercialize it. The Duke did not listen to her and said that they would fire her, and then asked again and asked what the resignation meant. The girl didn't understand what they were talking about, and he asked again if she really meant business. He was shocked and noted that he was simply thinking about people who should be fired. But she'd rather forget about it, and he hates wasting time on useless things like business, but asks her to tell him more. He was surprised because he thought it was because she was going to call the maids. The girl would have noted that her father probably heard at the magic stones. The gentleman asked in surprise what she meant by magic stones. In response, the girl explained that these stones contain two opposing magics that exist simultaneously, which makes them especially valuable and rare. The Duke frowned, digesting what he had heard, and asked if she was serious. He found it hard to believe such a statement, as it went against the generally accepted ideas about magic. However, the girl only shrugged, stating that even a 3-year-old child knew about the existence of magic stones with one attribute. The idea of dual magic seemed strange to him, but her confidence made him think. She added that if the proportions are calculated correctly, when creating such stones, they can be sold profitably. Then the idea no longer seems stupid, because their rarity makes them in demand. These words intrigued the Duke, and he said that he would like to know more about this. If the girl was not joking, then such knowledge could be very useful. Hearing his interest, the girl decided to tell more. She explained that her words were not just guesses, but the result of observations and calculations. These were not empty fantasies. At first, the Duke thought that the girl was simply stubborn and wanted to insist on her own way, but listening to her explanations, he realized that they were surprisingly logical and maturely justified for her age. Everything came together to form a single picture. Then, the girl said that she could try to implement her idea, but she had to act carefully. Hasty actions could lead to undesirable consequences. The Duke concluded that she had prepared for this conversation in advance. He noted her confidence and logic, which made him pay closer attention to her words. After that, the girl changed the subject and asked if he liked the food. The Duke, without thinking twice, replied that it was certainly not a culinary masterpiece, but quite edible. However, he was pleasantly surprised by the taste. He also noticed that the girl seemed to want to say something else, but hesitated. Her gaze betrayed thoughtfulness, as if she was choosing the right words. The Duke praised her sincerity, hoping to encourage her to talk. Then the girl, gathering her courage, admitted that she had one more request. but it was difficult for her to voice it. The Duke looked at her carefully and guessed that the conversation would be about the maids. He was almost sure that the girl was going to ask for something related to them. Still, there is a childish side to her too, and he can't believe that she is going to fire them. He will never let them into the estate again, and this applies to everyone who gets in the way. She mentioned that she wanted to ask if she could count on 20% of the income after starting trading, and then the gentleman said that he would fire them immediately. He didn't listen to her again and thought about the maids, but then he realized that he had screwed up again. The girl also told him that if this was too much, then 10% would also be fine. She was shocked that she wanted to fire them so badly and asked again if this was on topic. He said that they would talk later and did not understand when she would ask to fire them. He asked again what she was talking about and what the topic was, because she was his only daughter and princess, and he hoped that she would not forget about it. He couldn't understand why he felt uneasy when he looked at her. There was a worry in her eyes, as if she was about to say something important, but was unsure whether she should. He was sure that his daughter was simply shy and did not dare to say it directly. He believed that it was time for her to voice her desires, because he believed that she should learn to talk about what she really wants. So to dispel her doubts, he hastened to assure his daughter that she should not worry about this. She could ask him anything she wanted and not be afraid of being judged or misunderstood. The girl looked at him carefully, then nodded gratefully. She sincerely appreciated his words, and a little embarrassed apologized for disturbing him with what she thought were insignificant requests. The man was surprised to see that she was about to leave, but Annette calmly explained that she really had to go and asked him to think about her request. If everything worked out, she hoped that he would definitely let her know. He couldn't believe that she would just leave without saying anything important. With a little worry in his voice, he asked if she had forgotten to tell him something, because it seemed to him that something was missing from her words. And then Annette suddenly remembered what had happened the day before. Realizing this, she hastened to say that yesterday's event, in all likelihood, only made him happy, but added nothing more. Annette noticed that when she spoke to her mother, she first apologized for making her tea without permission. She knew she had done wrong, but she wanted to help, even if it meant disobeying a little. At the same time, the girl paid attention to the tea that she gave her mother. It was made from dried lotus flowers, and she deliberately chose this drink knowing about its properties. The Duke could not contain his indignation and asked again what she was talking about. After all, according to his recollections, Annette served not tea, but ordinary wheat grains. The girl was surprised to hear this. She was sure that he was wrong. Lotus tea is not known to everyone, but it really does alleviate the symptoms of her mother's illness a little, and that is why she chose it. She had heard about it a long time ago from a pharmacist who had accidentally shared such knowledge. But he had also warned her that this tea should not be consumed too often, despite its benefits. Lotus tea is addictive and should only be consumed in extreme cases when the pain becomes unbearable. Otherwise, addiction can lead to serious consequences. This is not a medicine that can completely cure the disease, so it cannot be given often. If the mother gets used to it, then giving up tea will be even more painful for her. Of course, a cure for this disease may be found someday, but there is a chance that it will be useless or will appear too late. By that time, Rosanna will be gone. Even someone as confident and self-satisfied as she is will not be able to survive such a loss. One way or another, the pain will be too strong, and one day she will follow her family. The fate is already decided. In 5 years, Roseanne Aubrey will die, and 2 years later, her husband Chagall will also leave this world, leaving behind only emptiness. Annetta understood perfectly well that she could not allow herself to get used to a quiet life where there was warmth, care, and comfort. All this was temporary, and if she became dependent on comfort, she would one day lose herself. She is given a lifespan of 6 to 7 years, at most. Her body is covered with ancient spells in her previous incarnation. She died within 7 years when the writings covered her entire body. Annette decided that now was the time to go to her father and wish him a good day. She hoped that this simple gesture would brighten the morning atmosphere a little. The Duke was stunned. Was that all? He expected her to raise the issue of the maids, but she did not even hint at it. Trying to understand the situation, the Duke turned sharply to Pedro and asked what he was doing. He was irritated by the butler's strange behavior. Pedro calmly explained that noticing the master's dissatisfaction with the food, he decided to remove it. If the Duke did not object, he himself could finish the dish. The Duke did not hesitate for long, and loudly ordered that the food be left where it was, and that they leave immediately. His voice was sharp and unyielding. Pedro just smiled silently and left the room as if he was not at all upset by this answer. A new thought had already occurred to him. He needed to make more tea. He knew that the Duke would hardly refuse a good drink. Annetta tried her best, but the result left much to be desired. She was shocked. Had she really overestimated her culinary abilities? At one time, her dishes even impressed a mad scientist, and one picky eater ate them with pleasure. So now, she couldn't understand the reason for the failure. Since childhood, she had been accustomed to good food, and its taste had always been impeccable. The Aubrey family had only one heir, a boy with green hair inherited from his father and intelligent violet eyes. He had a stern military expression on his face that made him look about 13 years old, but he was actually much older. In the twilight of the Aubrey family, he, a future free knight, will meet a heroine with a magical gift who will change his destiny. And once again, images that seem to have never existed before surface in her memory. They come suddenly without warning, filling her consciousness, like pieces of a mosaic coming together to form an unknown picture. Who is the main character here, the main heroine? And what does all this mean? These questions are ringing in her head, but there are no answers yet. Everything seems confusing, as if she found herself in someone else's story, where she does not know her role. Until today, they had only glimpsed each other at the dinner table. Their glances had met, but not even a brief conversation had occurred. It was as if they existed in the same world, but on different sides of it. But then he came up to her and said that he knew who she really was, as if he was hinting at something important, but he didn't explain it. He just noted that she should just say hello and move on, as if their meeting had no significance. Then the guy added that he hadn't expected to see her here, the girl who had taken his sister's place. There was bewilderment and some irritation in his voice, as if he still couldn't come to terms with this fact. And now Annette clearly understands what Enos Aubrey really is. Before he seemed to her just an arrogant young man, but now she sees more. There is something hidden in his gaze that is not immediately clear. Outwardly, he really does look like a duke. His face is beautiful and cold, but behind this flawless mask hides a man who it seems simply cannot smile sincerely. In his gaze, there is eternal detachment. He is clearly not happy to see her. It is felt in every word he says. His hostility is so obvious that Annette decides not to prolong the meeting and simply leaves. There is no point in staying where she is not wanted. She is already exhausted. But he, casting an appraising glance at her, sarcastically, remarks that even though she was dressed like a noblewoman, she still looks ridiculous, as if she is a stranger in this outfit, a stranger in this world. To him, she is just a simpleton that her father brought into their home for some reason, a girl trying to seem like someone else, but in his opinion, unsuccessfully. He looks at her with a slight mockery. Annette tries to answer, but he interrupts her before she can finish her sentence. With undisguised superiority, he remarks that she must have nothing to say since she hesitated so. She notes to herself that this is probably a real talker. Not only does Enos never miss a chance to get his say in, but he clearly enjoys it since he interrupts her without a shadow of a doubt. Then she calmly turns to him and, looking him straight in the eye, says that if he has already spoken, she would prefer to leave. She has more important things to do than argue with him. His gaze darkens, and he asks her again what she just said. But Annette is not embarrassed. She simply points out that she is answering him in the same tone in which he addresses her. She needs the goodwill of a few people to survive, the Duke and Duchess. But whether she needs to earn the trust of this miniature version of the Duke, that's the big question. The Duke, as it turned out, loves his wife more than life itself. He will never throw her out, at least for the sake of her health. Which means that this boy's behavior does not pose any threat to hers. It seemed he was really at home that she was a little girl. She asked why she had to behave well if she was not obliged to be nice to him. The guy was surprised that she still hadn't realized her true nature. After all, in his opinion, she wasn't particularly smart, and he certainly didn't force her to be nice to him. The girl quickly realized that he was the true heir of the ducal family, her own son. This added to the gravity of the situation, but she was not going to give up. Her life, she believed, would end faster than anyone else's if she did not take action. Everything that was happening seemed unacceptable and dangerous to her, so she decided that the first thing she would do was take revenge. She told him that if he thought she would be scared, he was deeply mistaken. She noted that she was not afraid of him and did not understand the power he wielded. It did not particularly matter to her at the time. However, she hoped that he understood that she could not be driven out of here, and she would remain in her position despite everything. If she suddenly disappears, she is sure that the Duchess will become much worse, and the guy does not want her health to deteriorate from worries. Her goal was to gain freedom and live the life she wanted. She was going to prepare and act to survive and not regret it. That's why she didn't allow herself to become weak, and she wasn't going to tolerate some boy trampling on her and her life principles. But suddenly, she saw the anger appear on his face and realized that perhaps she had made a mistake in her words. He seemed to be really attached to the Duchess, and the thought of her suffering filled him with such a fit of rage that he could hardly restrain himself. It was at that moment that she heard her mother's voice. The older brother immediately calmed down, clearly sensing her presence. The mother asked what had happened to make them look so upset, and her question made everyone relax a little. The boy was scared when he saw his mother. He turned his attention to the girl and noticed that she immediately started smiling, as if nothing had happened. The girl smiled sincerely, because she felt saved, but at the same time, she was an excellent actress who knew how to hide her emotions. Annetta, without wasting any time, quickly rushed to her mother and hugged her tightly, feeling a great sense of relief and security in this. The older brother was clearly irritated. He knew what kind of actress she was, and could not help but notice her cunning. The girl, as always, played her role brilliantly. The lady watching what was happening asked Enos to come closer to them, hoping that he would step forward and join the family scene. Enos didn't move from his place, and the girl began to lose patience. She had no idea how stubborn this boy could be. Soon, however, he came up to them, and the girl, feeling relieved, hugged him. She said that she was so happy to be with her babies. Annette couldn't understand what was happening to this boy. Where was his usual arrogance and haughty face? Everything changed in a short moment. He looked completely different, and the mother, unable to contain her curiosity, decided to ask him what he had done with Annette and why she had ended up in his hands. She thought that perhaps he was trying to do something bad to the girl, and decided to ask what they were talking about. The guy was at a loss. This situation turned out to be extremely difficult for him, and he did not know how to get out of it without unnecessary consequences. He was scared. And despite this, the girl believed that at this moment, she needed to intervene to dispel all misunderstandings and diffuse the atmosphere. The girl explained that they were simply greeting each other as expected, and that nothing more happened between them than a normal greeting. He just came a little closer to gently brush a speck of dust from her curls, and that was all. The boy was in complete shock, and his mother was happy because he is such a good and beloved brother. Now he must watch his language with all his might. The girl said that he is truly her favorite brother, and he is very good. Enos indeed confirmed that he simply wanted to brush off a speck of dust, and asked why mother had gone out and how she was feeling. The Duchess said that fortunately she was much better today. I think the lotus tea really did work, but it's better not to overdo it. Now Annette is going to go to her father, and the guy should stay with his sister and look after her while she is gone. The girl hopes that everything will be okay. Before leaving, Annette said that her brother had promised to show her the estate, and she was looking forward to it. It was a big deal for her. When Annette left, the girl turned around to go to her room. The guy became interested and asked her where she was going, not understanding her intentions. Annette explained that she was heading to her room because she had some urgent matters to attend to, and now she needed to be alone to deal with them. Regarding the estate, she added that there was no need to show her around it. Since she already knew everything, she did not want to waste time on unnecessary walks. The guy asked her in surprise if she really thought that if she behaved like this, it would lead to them becoming a real family. Annetta didn't quite understand his words, and was sure that he already understood that it was impossible. Why he continued to talk about it, she didn't understand. Then she realized that he was simply afraid of losing his place. He was worried that she might take his position in this family, and that bothered him. Annette realized that he was trying to protect his position in this way, and although it seemed stupid in some way, her words still made sense. The girl calmly replied that this was not so, and smiled at him, trying to dispel his doubts and show that she would not fight for his place. She added that she can say for sure that she never thought about it, did not see herself as part of this family, and did not set such goals for herself. Family for her is a sacred and unchanging love, but she abandoned this dream the moment she was handed over to the scientists, and she has not tried to return to it. Annetta said directly that she would never really become part of their family because it was impossible, and for her it didn't matter anymore. The guy was completely shocked by her words and asked in bewilderment what she had just said, not believing what he had heard. The girl calmly replied that even if she was asked about it, she would not agree to become part of this family. She was not ready to make such concessions, so he shouldn't worry, her decision won't change. She definitely won't become a member of his family, and that needs to be accepted. The guy was in complete shock, and Annette just stood there and smiled at him, enjoying how his reaction changed to her words. Talking about family when she was only 6 or 7 years old seemed strange. Annetta felt that family was something distant and vague for her. She used this family solely for revenge, and decided that it was not worth misbehaving in front of her mother, because now she needed to behave correctly. As Annette walked to her room, her thoughts returned to the question of family. She wondered what family was in her understanding. If she had seen them as family, perhaps she would not have stood by, knowing that their days were numbered. After all, no one knew what would happen next. But for her, family is just an illusion. No matter how hard a person tries to get love, if the same blood does not flow in their veins, everything is in vain. Annette was sure that she would not be able to receive love, and the very thought of searching for warmth within her frightened her and turned her inside out. The father turned to his eldest son and said that his manners left much to be desired. Even his younger sister behaved better. He recalled that he should have been taught proper table manners, but his behavior clearly did not correspond to this. Enos immediately apologized, realizing that the girl had mastered her manners well, and he was a little ashamed of his behavior. Annette had had many hardships in her life, and now she felt a bit awkward. It was hard to remember the past, but she tried to be reserved. Father noticed that Enos also hugged his mother, knowing that she was sick. His concern seemed sincere, but something was still wrong. You can't act so carelessly, because everyone understood perfectly well how important it is to remember the feelings of others. Memory played a key role here, and so it happened Enos, who should have been surrounded by love and care, grew up alone despite all attempts to find support. At first, Annette was curious why he was so touchy, but she thinks that he lacks self-confidence. He has never been cared for. And it is not that he is not loved. He was always loved, and even when he was angry, his father did not take it out on his son. He felt guilty for what was happening and worried about his own mistakes. The situation was strange, and it felt that way. Something was clearly wrong, as if the memories were jumbled and did not give a clear understanding of what was happening. Suddenly, memories began to roll in with unprecedented force. This was happening for the first time. Apparently, these memories were not exclusively from a niece's life. Father then looked at Annette and asked what she was thinking while they were eating. He wanted to understand what was going on in her head at that moment, what she was going through. The girl answered with a slight smile that she simply had enough food, she was full. Her words were sincere, although they sounded a little strange. The father was puzzled by her answer, and the son also could not understand how she could be full when she barely touched the food. This made them think. She barely touched the food, ate a couple of salads, and only 3 small bites. This seemed like unnatural behavior for a child accustomed to large quantities of food. But the girl didn't understand why they were so surprised. She ate her fill and even asked if she needed to eat more. That was enough for her. The father just sighed heavily and told her to forget about it. His look showed that he didn't know what to do and was trying to avoid an unpleasant conversation. He thought that she ate as much in the orphanage as she did then, but the girl confirmed that too much food gets in the way, makes the head heavy and the body clumsy. Despite this, they saw nothing wrong with her words. The girl confidently said that it was important to attend classes and do assignments, and that this required discipline. Discipline was also valued at the orphanage. There was a strict middle-aged man named N who praised good behavior and punished sternly for mistakes. The girl finished her meal and, slightly bowing her head, asked if she could go. She took the situation more simply than the others, but it seemed naive. Her father informed her that a teacher would be coming to see her from this week. He reminded her that she should attend classes regularly, which is important for her future. The girl confirmed his words, agreeing. The father was surprised by her calmness and the fact that she did not ask questions. Annette did not quite understand why this was so important. Father couldn't understand why Annette wasn't interested in the class schedule. He expected that she would at least want to know more about the educational process. He sincerely did not understand why the girl did not show curiosity and asked her questions, but she replied that it would not change anything. Her father was very surprised by her answer and asked her again, but Annette said with confidence that of course, no, it doesn't matter. The girl added that she doesn't understand why people ask such questions if nothing will change anyway, but she remains of the same opinion. Her father waved his hand and told her to just forget about these questions. It was obvious that it bothered him a little. Annette asked if she could walk through the offices, and her father, surprised, asked again if she meant his office. The girl confirmed that she meant his office, and that it would be her first time there since she had never been there before. In this life and in the past, Annette had never gone beyond her usual surroundings. This was something new and unusual for hers. She felt a little awkward, but said that if she couldn't do it, she would understand. It wouldn't be a big deal if they forbade it. The father seemed to remember that someone had said that it was forbidden, but he said that he thanked her for understanding. In the end, it didn't matter so much. He said that if she wanted, she could come tomorrow. Annette happily agreed, feeling that everything would work out. The girl thanked him for permission and noticed that he looked a little embarrassed, as if he had not expected her to ask such a thing. At the end, he added that perhaps he would allow it, after all. His words were not entirely confident, but there was still some hope in them, as if he was ready to consider her request. The girl didn't quite understand what exactly he wanted from her, but she decided to act as if he was simply embarrassed and didn't know what to do right at this moment. She still hoped that he wouldn't force her to do something she didn't want to do. This hope was her only consolation, because it was unpleasant for her to experience this moment. Perhaps he would change his mind tomorrow if he was free and she could get permission. She lived with that thought, hoping that everything would be resolved without any problems. After that, she turned to her father. He, noticing her glance, turned to her, ready to listen to what she wanted to tell him. She clearly had something in mind and could not remain silent. Annette noticed that her father seemed to be busy, but the thought of asking him to take her to the capital with him still came into her head. She couldn't miss such an opportunity. The Duke replied that there was nothing to be done about it, but warned her not to expect anything special. He did not want her to build too much hope into this move. Despite the fact that she was irritated by all these people who were constantly around, the father could not refuse his daughter, even if he did not like it. This was an immutable rule. However, the girl felt that all this was already going too far. When she looked at her brother, his face expressed obvious displeasure, and this made her think. She was confused, not understanding what to do now. A feeling of uncertainty arose inside her, and she did not know how to act in this situation, what to decide first. Then she stood up and walked away, leaving behind a strange doubt. This doubt remained with her as she walked away, feeling that something in her actions was not quite right. Her brother came up behind her and said that she seemed to enjoy all this fake drama. He thought that she wanted to get her father's attention and was trying her best to be part of their family. His father had never taken him to the capital. The girl had said she could go, but the Duchess's intervention had caused a misunderstanding, and everything had turned out to be much more complicated than she had thought. She could try to explain herself, but no one knew what consequences that might lead to. The question remained open, and there was no solution in the near future. She didn't want to get involved in stupid arguments with her brother, because it was clear that he didn't share her point of view. She would rather avoid conflict and find another solutions. Duke Aubrey cared for his son in his own way, and it was not worth thinking about too much. She tried to reassure herself, knowing that his attitude on these matters was different, so she said she had plans for tomorrow. However, in 2 days, she was going to show how much her father loved him by trying to prove her point. He still didn't understand what she was talking about. It was a mystery to him, and he couldn't figure out what she was trying to convey. There was only confusion in his eyes. The girl looked down and said confidently that if she could prove something, he should stop being angry with her. This was an important condition for her. Annetta decided to find out if her father had a special place where he often went for walks in order to get some information about his habits and preferences. She was sure that she was very good at recognizing when dishonest people began to show their true side, and the guy said that his favorite place was the pond in the garden. He often walks by the pond, and this was like Cabal. Annette thanked him for the information, suggesting that they meet there the next day after breakfast to discuss important matters. The guy, noticing her intentions, asked what she was planning and whether she was going to deceive him again. Annetta answered that she just wanted to explain everything. She wanted to convince her brother that there was no reason to continue being angry with her, and this was very important to her. The girl was determined to do this. It was not that simple, but she hoped that in the future, everything would become clear, and their meeting tomorrow would help resolve all misunderstandings and conflicts. However, Annette decided to put off all matters until tomorrow and focus on more pressing matters related to the Duke and her plans. Annette was aware of many facts about the future of Duke Aubrey, and his life she knew well what awaited him. In her past life, she read all the newspapers that the mad scientist kept studying them from beginning to end. These newspapers were full of information. However, Annette wasn't sure if it mentioned anything about the Duke's past. She was almost certain that it did, but she knew exactly how he would die. But the most interesting thing was how she learned that Cabal Aubrey was the third son in his family, had a difficult childhood, became distrustful, and loved his son. The newspaper might report facts, but it said almost nothing about his personal life, and how she knew for sure that he would sacrifice himself for his son remained a mystery. The girl herself could not understand where she had so much information from. She did not remember the details, but she knew it all too clearly, and it confused her. When she tried to remember something from the past, it seemed that her memories were incomplete. Her head was empty, and it was as if someone had taken away everything important, leaving only a song that never played. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in front of her. She was confused, not understanding what was happening, and tried to understand where she was and why everything was so strange. The world around her disappeared, and only the unknown remained. Her gaze fell on the magical seal that appeared right in front of her. It was something unusual, and she couldn't figure out where it came from. She felt like everything around her was unfamiliar. In a panic, she began to get nervous, not knowing what to do. There were too many questions in her head, but she couldn't answer them. Everything was happening so fast that she didn't have time to understand what it all meant. Soon she found herself in a space that was something like a white, endless field. She felt complete horror because she realized that she was definitely not home. It was a place, but something was wrong with it. Suddenly, her soul seemed to be drawn into some dark void, as if something invisible was pulling her into the unknown. This feeling was so strong that she could not get rid of it. She tried to figure out what kind of strange space surrounded her. A white abyss, as if she found herself between worlds, and she didn't understand at all what it was and what was happening to her. A black silhouette appeared in the darkness. It stood nearby and stared at her. It was a shadow from which came a feeling of something sinister and unfamiliar. She began to frantically look around, trying to understand what it was. Maybe it was just an illusion? But her senses did not deceive her, and she felt that everything around was alive and real. Suddenly, a loud sound burst into her ears, as if someone had turned up the volume on a loudspeaker. It was the voice of a guy who realized his mistake and realized that he was talking too loudly to her. He tried to calm down, and in a quieter voice asked her to tell him how she felt about his speech. Now it was hard for him to get used to the new conditions, but he still hoped that she would understand him. The girl answered with difficulty that she was feeling better now, but she did not understand everything that was happening. He, in turn, was happy because they finally met. Annetta, completely unaware of who was in front of her and where she was, asked the guy about it. He replied that he was just an administrator and that the situation would be strange for her. The girl looked at him in confusion. not understanding what was happening. He said it was an archive, but that only confused her even more. She couldn't understand what he was talking about. In the archive, she was the only person who could enter it. She still didn't understand what this place was. If it was an archive, why was it so empty? Why was there so little information around, and what was the point? The questions remained unanswered. The guy, noticing her confusion, advised her to look around carefully. He assured her that the archive was not empty at all, and that it contained much more than she thought. Suddenly, books began to appear around Annetta, and it became clear to her that she was in a library surrounded by a huge amount of material and knowledge. It was much more impressive than she had expected. The guy said that the pages of these books contain the whole truth about this world, all the secrets and mysteries. He thought that she would want to read and reveal this truth. However, the girl could not choose where to start, because all the books were similar. Their covers were the same, and she could not understand which of them would be useful to her. But soon, her gaze fell on one book that was different from the rest. It had a completely different cover, which caught Annetta's attention. He told her to read it specifically because the book was quite interesting and could provide answers to the important questions she was looking for. Annetta, no longer surprised by anything, opened the book. There was a story about the event of August 8, 2019, a date that turned out to be significant in her life. The book said that she was robbed by swindlers and died shortly after, when she was taken on a white bus on the day of her walk. It sounded terrible and sad. Annetta sighed heavily. The guy added that the rest of the text was written in a long-forgotten language, and she would not be able to read it since she did not have the necessary abilities. She was not prepared to perceive such complex texts because she did not have the skills to decipher the ancient language in which the story continued. He said that something really interesting was coming, but the girl didn't understand what exactly he meant. She felt that something important was about to happen. She tried to understand why the guy was so insistent on her looking forward, even though it all seemed strange. But he kept saying that she needed to be ready for something important. And then she noticed how the book began to move on its own. It was absolutely impossible and amazing for her. She could not take her eyes off this phenomenon. When Annette's gaze fell on one of the pages, she saw the date, February 17th, 2016. And the note said that this day was the most important and the best. It was about Duke Cabal Aubrey, who wounded himself to save his son. It was a heroic deed, but in the world of books, there are no more heroes like him. Because in life, everything is different. It was sad to realize that Duke Cabal would not appear in the story anymore. People in real life are often greedy, and their thoughts are occupied only with how to take other people's money. From what she read, Annette realized that the diary's author was sharing his impressions of the affair with the green eyes. She continued reading, trying to understand more about the meaning of these entries. The reviews of the book seemed normal, but in one place, the house of Duke Aubrey was mentioned. This was strange because this house could hide more than it seemed at first glance. The notes said that his daughter was missing, but one day he found her in an orphanage. This event was very disconcerting and thought-provoking. The main character, and the character named Key, remained a mystery to her. She couldn't figure out who they were or what was going on in this strange book that was confusing her thoughts. And suddenly, the book literally pushed her away, giving her an electric shock. The administrator explained that this story was too complicated, and it was too early for Annette to delve too deeply into its details. Annette couldn't help but ask what kind of book it was. Her curiosity was growing stronger, and she felt that this book was hiding something important about her life. The guy replied that the book was a reflection of her life, but in an abridged form. It was her own story, but without the details, without the things that could change everything. The girl did not understand what was happening to her. Of course, she could not understand it, because it was connected with her past, and looking into it was strictly forbidden. She was one of those who lived many lives. Each new existence is a new chance, but the past lives are still not forgotten, remaining in her soul. This book contained all her past lives, and although she remembered nothing about them, her soul knew them everywhere, every event, every step she had ever taken. She couldn't remember what had happened before, but her soul kept everything within itself. Every detail, every mistake, and every correction that had happened in her multiple lives. At that moment, the girl thought about her past. The administrator explained that the archive is accessible to everyone, but only those who have already survived death with the key in their hands can get there. The girl was stunned and hurried to find out what kind of key it was. The administrator explained that the magic circle on her wrist was that very key, a symbol of forbidden magic. He assured her that there was no need to be afraid of this, because the key was on her side, and it would not cause any harm. She just needed to relax a little and not worry without reason. The manager announced that it was time for him to leave and said goodbye to her, noting that many things would remain undisclosed until the next meeting. He reminded her that they would still have plenty of time and advised her to be careful, because such meetings could have unexpected consequences. Finally, he said that the first meeting should always be short, otherwise it will be difficult to understand what is happening, and it may become too complex to perceive. The girl began to feel how she was rapidly falling, but before she could say goodbye, she managed to see how the guy was waving his hand at her, disappearing into the distance. However, instead of falling, she simply opened her eyes and found herself lying on her bed as if nothing had happened. When she got out of bed, she felt unbearably ill, as if something was wrong, and her body responded painfully to what was happening. At this moment, the maid entered the room and presented her with a new dress, which she thought would be perfect for the following day. The girl just smiled in response and didn't know what to say. Her thoughts were occupied with something completely different, and words didn't come to mind. The girl, whose name was Annette, finally remembered that she had to play the role of a sweet girl, and said with a smile that she considered herself very beautiful. She tried not to miss the moment. The maid, who was watching Annette, remarked that she thought the sailor suit would look just perfect on her. An argument immediately began among the maids about what dress to choose for their mistress. Annette felt disappointed, because once again there was an argument about what she should wear. She decided not to waste time and suggested that it would be better if she chose the outfit. Annette knew perfectly well that Mary was strict and decisive, but at first she thought Golda was quiet and modest. However, she soon realized that these girls really were alike like twins. The girls could not hide their admiration. The dress suited Milady perfectly. It beautifully emphasized her style and especially matched the color of her hair. She walked towards her father, feeling how the shades of emerald suited her. Judging by all the compliments, she really did successfully cope with the role of the Duke's daughter, looking flawless. The girl smiled, surprised at how much she resembled her father. This discovery pleasantly surprised her. They thought it was very touching and were happy that the lady had returned home. However, there was one situation in front of Mary and Golda, but now she was saying goodbye to them. It was an important farewell, which she had come to terms with. At first, the girls did not understand what this farewell actually meant, but then they simply said goodbye to the lady, accepting everything as it was without unnecessary words. Annette didn't have time to process all the events that had happened. She lost consciousness and only woke up the next morning when her thoughts were still in disarray. She asked the Duke for permission to take a walk. She wanted to be alone for a while, to get her thoughts in order and understand what was going on around her. As she walked, she began to wonder who Key was. At some point it became clear to her that she was inside a novel, and she was one of the main characters. She remembered reading this novel, but she didn't know that life could change so drastically. She remembered the emerald eyes, if of course it was true what she was told. Perhaps Key is the real daughter of the Duke, and she should be the main character of this story. Annette's thoughts did not leave her, and she was more and more immersed in this assumption. Thinking back to her past life, she remembered a newspaper article. It was about a duke taking his daughter from an Iranian orphanage. It was thought-provoking. She didn't even know that she had taken someone else's place in this life. Her father noticed her lateness and expressed his concern that she hadn't arrived on time. He also noticed that she looked especially lovely today. Perhaps it was because of the new elegant dress she had put on, unaware of its effect. The girl thanked him, saying that it was all thanks to him. Her words were sincere. She felt gratitude for everything he had done for her, but she still didn't understand why he was so silent. And at some point she realized it, but she didn't want to say it out loud because it was difficult. Duke Aubrey turned out to be much more considerate and intelligent than she thought. This made her think, and she felt that her theory was not so crazy. She had to say it out loud, though. Trying to muster up her courage, she said that today, Dad looked even brilliant, despite all her doubts. The girl said these words with a good-natured smile, and the Duke, glancing at her, noted that everything remained as before. This familiar tone, this lightness in the voice, everything corresponded to expectations. She was sure that this was the answer that was required, so as not to raise unnecessary questions. Having finished the conversation, they calmly got into the carriage, not giving any sign that there was something more hidden behind their words. The Duke had a lot of work to do and could have refused the trip, but it seemed he needed this rest himself. His behavior showed that, deep down, he missed his daughter. But Annette knew her position. Her presence here was temporary, and if she got too carried away with her role, she could easily lose even this chance. If she got carried away, she would simply be thrown out. The Duke, without showing any particular emotion, asked the girl where she would like to go. Apparently, he decided to give her the opportunity to choose what to do that day. Annette thought for a moment, and then replied that she just wanted to go for a walk and feel free. She also suggested going to a clothing store or going out to eat. The Duke narrowed his eyes and asked if she really wanted this. The girl nodded without hesitation, showing that this was not a casual phrase. She understood that he was looking at her desires. It didn't matter to her where she went. Children were usually happy about such things, but the Duke clearly saw it differently. Contrary to her expectations, the walk was to remind her again that this world was built on power and money. In one of the boutiques, Annette noticed a lovely pink dress, and with a mischievous smile, told her father that she liked it. After that, with obvious pleasure, she asked him to buy up the entire toy store and a whole collection of the same dresses. The Duke noted with a slight smile that his only daughter was not without courage. She expressed her desires without embarrassment, and this even amused him a little. This is how he thought money should be spent, confidently, without regard for the consequences. At that moment, he was completely satisfied with her behavior, seeing in it the right attitude. However, his face did not reveal any real emotions. Even if he was pleased, there was no genuine joy in the expression of his eyes. Rather, a slight shadow of disappointment slid across his features. Annette couldn't understand why she couldn't please her father. She just begged for a little sweets, hoping for a little weakness on his part. The father thought it was very stupid. His daughter was thinking only about food all the time. Excited, he told her that the next place they would go was jewelry stores. Annette, smiling, replied that she hadn't really thought about it. She just wanted to enjoy the walk, spend time with her father, and see the capital. She had never been to the capital before, and everything here was new and surprising to her. Every corner seemed unusual and full of adventures. The father was silent for a moment, and then admitted that if his daughter wanted something, he could not refuse her. His heart softened when she asked for something. Annette didn't even have to persuade him for long, although he always tried to remain strict. He knew that here in the capital, he shouldn't be harsh. She suggested with a smile that perhaps it was time to get back to the carriage. She needed to go before her father changed his mind and started reminding her of other duties. Already in the carriage, Annette wondered if it was possible to return all the purchases they had made. There was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes that they had made the right choice. The father could not believe his ears when he heard her proposal. He could hardly restrain himself from expressing indignation, but he was ready to compromise for the sake of his daughter. Annette shared that she was actually sad. She thought it would be nice to give a gift to others, but she felt she wouldn't be able to use it. Her eyes darkened at the thought that in 5 years, she would no longer be around, so buying things she would not be able to wear seemed too sad. Her father replied reservedly that she could always take these things with her. It was a compromise of sorts, but he did not want to upset her further. Annette didn't understand how this would be possible, because in a few years the things would already be too small for her. She couldn't imagine how all this could be used. Her father replied with a smile that in that case she could just get rid of them. However, that didn't change how she felt. Everything was too complicated. Meanwhile, their trip was coming to an end, and he announced that they had already arrived. Annette felt a slight relief that everything was finally over. As she was getting out of the carriage, the Duke offered her his hand to help her down. Annette was surprised, but nevertheless accepted his gesture. She still agreed, although she was a little taken aback by such attention. It was unexpected, but at some point she felt that she could trust him. The Duke gave her his hand as they entered the carriage. He was not rude, and his manners, though not exactly refined, were respectable. She noticed that he always walked ahead, and she began to like it. Everything around her seemed to fall into place, and she gradually got used to her new role. Annette wanted to grab his hand, but a sudden noise made her turn around. Her gaze fell on what was happening in the distance. Something had clearly happened there, something that required attention. The girl froze amazed by what she saw. Her heart began to beat faster. However, the Duke, who was standing next to her, simply turned away, as if all this did not interest him at all. Slowly, her mind began to put the pieces of the puzzle together. It was something familiar, something from the past that she couldn't quite remember, but the feeling of unease was growing. A man standing in the middle of the crowd was shouting loudly that he had irrefutable proof. He assured everyone that the mad scientist who was thought to be dead was actually alive. The Duke called out to his daughter, trying to distract her from what was happening, but Annette didn't even move. She continued to watch, her gaze riveted on the scene in front of her. The focus was on a creature, a chimera, a test subject created specifically for murder. It was something artificially bred, not belonging to the world of people. The man continued to shout, explaining that he had purchased the creature for a huge amount of money. He claimed that he had been promised a rare specimen, but now he clearly had no idea what he was dealing with. Annette felt something tighten inside her. She recognized this creature. Yes, it really was a chimera before her, a product of the terrible experiments she had once heard about. A scientist once conducted a dangerous experiment in an attempt to create a creature for murder. He used methods bordering on divine deception to create something devoid of a soul. At first, the project was accompanied by talk and rumors. However, the creature turned out to have low intelligence, and then it began to disintegrate completely, as if it was incapable of existence. However, the chimera continued to rebel, although it seemed to be unaware of its actions. It moved erratically, as if it did not understand what was happening around it. The experiment had clearly failed. Instead of a ruthless killer, they had something that looked completely harmless, even cute if you didn't know how it came into being. The Duke looked at the girl carefully, but could not understand what was happening to her. Her gaze was too intense, almost unnatural. Then he realized that she was clearly not herself. The father, noticing her condition, gently asked if she wanted anything. He assured her that he was ready to fulfill any of her wishes, if only she asked. Annette wondered what he meant, because they had already visited all the shops. What else could he offer? She became curious about what her father was going to buy for her. The girl answered with a smile that everything her dad had already bought was quite enough for her. She felt content and did not want to ask for anything else. It was the first time she had walked so freely around the capital, without unnecessary restrictions. She was especially pleased that today, for the first time, someone had offered her a hand as an equal, and not as a child. Annette thought that a simple girl would probably answer that this was enough for her, so she easily said that she owed everything to the care of her dear daddy. Then she suggested that they go home quickly, because she just wanted to take a walk, and now that was enough. Her father looked at her with disbelief, not believing that she was really happy with everything. But since she insisted, he agreed to leave, but he still had to hold her hand. He remarked that she needed to get out of the house more often, to which the girl only giggled cheerfully, without giving any answer. Her gaze slid over the strange creature that looked like a rose. She suddenly felt sad. In front of her was a creature abandoned by a mad scientist. It would be an exaggeration to say that this creature resembled the previous main character, but some vague features were still similar. The elder brother arrived at the appointed place. As always, the younger sister called him here, and he reluctantly, nevertheless, came. He was told that the meeting was necessary to prove that his father loved him more. He did not understand what kind of ridiculous statements these were, and why he needed to prove anything at all. Yes, his father had always been strict with him, but for some reason he went to the capital with this girl. He couldn't understand what was going on, and was angry at the joke unknown to him, as if someone had simply taken away his parental love. She dared to marry you off to this guy's little sister, the one with the fairy tale purple eyes? He couldn't understand how she had suddenly ended up in her place, and why his sick mother had suddenly become part of this conversation. Remembering his little sister, he felt a strange anxiety. Was she alive? Soon he met the girl, and her surprise at his arrival was noticeable. She did not expect him to appear, but still here he was. The guy noticed that he was already seriously thinking about returning. It all started to seem too complicated to him, but he wasn't going to back down yet. The girl suddenly asked him if he wanted to know if his father loved him, but the boy just shook his head and answered briefly, "His father is not capable of love." She was already tired of these conversations. Everything was repeated over and over again, and he could not understand the obvious. Time was running out. She looked at her brother and asked if he now knew the easiest way to achieve love. He frowned, not understanding where she was going with this. The girl merely remarked that sometimes circumstances were such that people could not control their emotions, no matter how strong they were. "That's why you're going to die," she said, coming closer. But her voice was calm. When she was very close, she asked quietly, "Let him just play along with her a little." He didn't understand anything. He couldn't comprehend what she had planned, but the girl continued assuring him that it wasn't his fault at all. The guy frowned and asked her to stop. She smiled and promised that she wouldn't do it again. "If father rushes to save you first, then I've won," she explained, and there was a strange determination in her voice. "And if I win, you'll finally leave me alone," she added, as if putting an end to the conversation. There was a lot of water. It seemed frighteningly deep, and its icy coldness penetrated to the bones. The father, seeing that his eldest son was drowning, jumped into the water without thinking. He knew that he could not swim, and fear for the child overshadowed everything else. He rowed towards him with all his might, not thinking about his own safety. Annetta, watching this, did not understand at all why her father was so scared. Could water really be so scary? After all, they were just playing, and nothing bad happened. The father, having reached his son, grabbed him and pulled him to the shore. He immediately examined him, asking if he was injured. Not having waited for a clear answer, he hastened to say that he would immediately call a doctor. The boy opened his mouth to explain something, but his father didn't let him say a word. He was too angry and shocked to listen to his excuses. His anger exploded. He screamed, demanding an explanation. How could his son decide to take such a step, knowing that he could not swim? Where was he going, and what was he planning to do? The father could not understand why he went into the water not knowing how to stay afloat. But instead of answering, the son suddenly asked how his father knew about it. The man just chuckled. Did his son really think his father didn't know that? He ordered him to stay here and wait until he brought the doctor. The boy realized that there was no point in arguing now. His father had just saved him, but he had never seen him so furious. It was even scarier than the water itself. However, the father did not calm down. He again demanded an explanation of how his son ended up in the water and why he allowed such a situation to happen. The guy, realizing that there was no point in hiding it, admitted that he was with Annetta. They were just playing, and somehow it happened that they both ended up in the water. The Duke was shocked when he heard this. He was literally dumbfounded, unable to believe his ears. It was not just fear, it was a real shock. When he looked down at the water, the surface was calm, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. No disturbances, no tracks, just emptiness, as if nothing had happened. Annette was in the icy water at the time, feeling the cold penetrate her body. But even through her trembling and fear, she noticed the figure of the Duke running towards them, so her brother was saved. However, contrary to her expectations, he did not stop next to her, did not look at her, but simply ran on as if not noticing her presence. Annette wanted to get rid of something burdensome, but did not understand why everything turned out this way. Only when she was in the water did she suddenly realize that she herself could not swim. But despite this, she felt like a winner. Although it was difficult to say what exactly the victory consisted of, she couldn't help but wonder how she knew that the guy couldn't swim. Where and when could she have learned that? Her mind was filled with new information that came up out of nowhere, and it was hard to get used to. In the cold water, Annette wondered, what if she died right now? What would happen then? Then there would be no more despair, no more pain, only peace, serenity, silence, and comfort. But at that moment, when these thoughts were still floating in her head, she suddenly felt that someone grabbed her. Her surprise knew no bounds when she opened her eyes and realized that she was no longer in the water. She survived. The Duke looked at her with horror, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Annette quietly apologized, explaining that they were simply playing where they shouldn't. Annetta was sure that her father had already scolded Inos for what had happened, but it turned out that the boy really couldn't swim. Then why was he looking at her so intently? Their mistake could have turned into a tragedy, and the realization of this caused a shudder. Father only said that this conversation was still ahead, but it was clear from his look that the consequences would not be long in coming. The Duke told her to go home immediately and warm up while he brought a doctor. A warm bath would help her come to her senses, but Annette did not understand why there was so much fuss. She felt fine and didn't understand why she had to lie in the room for 5 days. However, the maids were adamant. It was an order, and it was not discussed no matter how much she wanted to object. The doctor tried to explain that her condition was more dangerous than it seemed. It seemed that she had completely forgotten who she was. The heiress of a duke cannot afford frivolity. Realizing this, she decided to obey. It was all clear, but why did he have to be in her room? The thought of it made her feel vaguely uneasy. As she walked up the stairs, she was still wondering what was wrong with her brother. Why did his gaze seem so strange and piercing? However, this could be considered a truce. If he wanted to look at it that way, so be it. Over time, she would get used to it and stop attaching importance to it. She really thought so. But after 4 days, she realized that it was a delusion. She was forbidden to go out for 3 more days, and Duke Aubrey followed her literally at every step. It all resembled imprisonment, and Annette began to suffocate in this prison. Eating, changing clothes, playing and studying. All this was reminiscent of caring for a child who had just turned 3. The nannies did not leave her side, trying to please her in everything. Annetta didn't know how long it would last, but she already felt her nerves giving in. Every day was the same, and there was no end in sight. Her patience was gradually running out. But the worst thing was not even that she was worried about her brother, who for some reason began to look at her strangely. This look made her feel uncomfortable. Finally, she decided to ask him a direct question. But in response, she heard that she imagined that he was not looking at her at all. It sounded unconvincing. Chagall and Enos Aubrey also kept their eyes on her, even when she was just eating. It seemed they did this on purpose to irritate her. As soon as she said that, she had already recovered. He just waved her off, not listening to her words, and immediately asked if she needed a doctor. If this continues, she will soon simply become attached to the chair. Finally, her father admitted that she looked healthier now. It seemed like good news, but it didn't change anything. He said that he would come to her again after work, but for now it would be better for her to stay in the room. It sounded like an order, not a request. Annette was already beginning to get tired of his visits and increasingly wanted him to stop coming. Although there was some relief in this. At that moment, her brother suddenly asked her what she was thinking about that day, when she risked her life. He clearly did not understand why she would take such a dangerous step. The girl thought he was just complaining and quickly apologized. She assured him that she had a well-thought-out plan, and there was no real danger. But her brother suddenly flared up. He started shouting, reminding her that she had almost died. His reaction even took her a little bit by surprise. Annette admitted that she had made a mistake, but anything can happen. But her brother only became more angry, demanding an answer as to why she had climbed into the water if she couldn't swim. The girl calmly replied that she just wanted to get away from him. Her tone was indifferent, but her brother was not reassured. He was too upset because everything could end in tragedy because of such a trifle. The thought of it did not give him peace. The girl was completely taken aback by his words, and how strange he looked. It was so unexpected that she could not immediately understand what was happening, and his behavior only confused her. She noticed that he looked different. His eyes were red, as if he had just cried. Worried, she decided to ask him again if he was hiding something because his facial expression clearly showed his worries. But the guy, noticing her gaze, abruptly covered his face and said that he wasn't really crying. He was trying to assure her that he was okay, although his appearance said otherwise. The girl, not understanding what was really happening, asked herself, if these are not tears, then what are they? She realized that Enos was again remaining true to his principles, but she still noticed that her father made it clear that he loved him. The guy, hearing her, confirmed her words, adding that she was right. However, he immediately said that she should not worry, but in response, he reminded that when he saved him, he jumped into the water without thinking to help. The girl, however, did not agree with him. She said that there was nothing surprising about it because it was just the garden of the Duke's estate. No one could be allowed to drown there because everyone had to take care of each other. The boy, disagreeing, replied that it was not, that he explained that he had never seen his father run after someone so desperately. It was more than just duty. It was clearly a sincere impulse. He understood what it meant, and realizing it added that he cared about her. He even decided that he needed to apologize to his sister for once calling her a fake sister. It was a gesture of sincerity and regret. The girl, hearing this, did not believe it at first. She reminded him that he had not called her that for a long time, but the guy, smiling, said that he now officially declared her his younger sister, and this was his final choice. The girl did not understand why the golden one, after all, she had already promised that she would not bother him. But he understood that she was flattered and some kind of honor to have the best brother in the world. He smiled, but she didn't think it was necessary. She felt like she'd seen this reaction somewhere before. It all felt familiar, like she'd experienced it before. She remembered the Duke's words about being the best father in the world. His confidence was as bright as it had been when he said it, completely believing in his words. She remarked that she could do as she wished, and there was nothing surprising in this. During the meal, the mother turned to the children, saying that she had heard about their fall into the pond. Mother asked if they had caught a cold, to which the children replied that they were fine. Their faces lit up, and this calmed everyone at the table. Mother was delighted and invited everyone to join in the meal. She happily took a spoonful of soup, and the air filled with the aroma of food, heralding the beginning of the long-awaited dinner. She enjoyed the taste of the food. It had been a long time since she had sat at the table with salad and soup, which she liked so much. The taste was unsurpassed. She devoured every spoonful with pleasure. But then, feeling full, she realized it was time to stop. Her stomach was full, and the thought of stopping came naturally to her. The mother noticed that the girl had stopped eating, and she was surprised. She asked again if Annette was succumbing to illness, but Annette had just felt that the food was not to her taste. But the girl said that this was enough for her. It's just that when she eats before goodbye, she becomes slow like a snail. And in their shelter, you can't be like that, because immediately after eating, you have to earn money. There aren't enough employees. It seems she has talked too much, but now she is at home, and her mom and dad are with her. Probably now she can only eat as much as she wants. Mom noted that if she doesn't want more, then she doesn't have to go. Well, the girl said that it was very tasty for her. After all this, she was lying in her bed. She had overeaten. It seemed she had eaten a whole 1.5 portions, and in fact she wanted to go for a walk today and find out about the chimera. Annette thought it would be better to go alone, but now she was lost in thought, not understanding what to do. She could not understand her feelings. This worried her. But after much thought, Annette came to the conclusion that there was no point in continuing useless thoughts. She simply needed to act. Having decided so, she called the maids to tell them her request. The girl announced that she wanted to go out for a walk and hoped that she would be allowed to do so. She waited impatiently for an answer, because a walk seemed necessary to her at that moment. The maid was surprised that Annette decided to talk to her now, because she had her own idea. She hoped that the girl was going to visit the capital, which was a bit unexpected. Then the maid said that they would then pack her for the journey, and she was shocked that they did not agree, because she thought that without the Duke's permission, she could not go anywhere. The carriage ride to the store was quick. The girl watched the road, carefully dreaming about the purchase she wanted to make. Soon they were already there. The girl told the maids that she would be going into the shop alone and asked them to wait outside. She was determined and did not want anyone to accompany her. The maids insisted that they would go with her, but the mistress did not agree. She promised to return after a while, and in the meantime, they could watch her through the window. One of the maids, still expressing concern, asked the mistress to return as soon as possible after she had finished shopping. They were worried about her, who was left alone. When the girl entered the store, she immediately realized that the chimera was weakened. It was obvious that the animal was not properly cared for. This upset her. The girl wondered why they wanted to let her come here alone. Apparently, Marian the fasting hoped that she would cope quickly, But the seller had already started to follow her. The salesman approached her and asked her curiously what she wanted. He looked closely at her face and noticed that someone was watching her. The girl found what she was looking for, and the seller noted that her gaze was strange. He said that a rare animal she was looking for had recently arrived. The seller said that he had already started training the animal, but the girl could do it her own way. He was sure that she could handle the training. The girl felt that the animal looked bad, and she had a feeling that it was about to die. The state of the chimera worried her very much. She did not know what to do. The man said that the animal was just sleepy and had just woken up. However, the girl immediately realized that he was trying to deceive her, and confidently stated that the animal was clearly not well. She wanted to know how much he was willing to sell it for. The gentleman replied that it was a very rare and expensive species, so its price was about 5 million. He expected that the price would justify the quality of the animal despite its condition. The girl thought that the amount equal to the monthly expenses of a family of 4 was too much, especially since the seller clearly did not take care of the animal. She understood that paying such a sum for such an animal was a bad idea. Then the girl decided to clarify whether he had imported this animal legally, because such animals require special permits. She needed to understand whether he was breaking the law in this matter. It's all because they can't be sold anywhere, so she asks for documents. When he was confused, she asked if he really did it illegally. She was wondering how much she would get for reporting him to the authorities. He said that she shouldn't do this. She could take him for 3 million, but the girl started saying that he was sick and she would spend more on the vet. She didn't have that much money. She could give him no more than 300,000. The man tried to say that he would be left with nothing, to which the girl replied that this meant that he did not want to negotiate, and therefore she would give him 3 million, and then they would report him and return for her animal. The man did not agree to this, so he immediately told her to take it for 300,000, and she said that she was very glad that he agreed. Then she would come back in a week. The man was further shocked that she was not taking it now. The lady asked again what would happen if this animal infected her, and then her dad came back to smash his store. He probably doesn't like this. Of course, she's not going to tell the Duke. Well, she got sick and she got sick. In truth, she simply has no money. It seems she will have to sell dresses and jewelry that do not belong to her, and she does not dare to ask the Duke for money. A week later, the girl promised to return. She asked him to make sure the animal was alive. When she returned to do this, she needed to find the necessary amount of money by any means necessary. This creature, a chimera, could become a powerful weapon in her hands. She knew that this unusual and intelligent creature could play a decisive role in her future plans. The girl intended to educate and raise the chimera. She would train it so that it would become a loyal assistant and ally when it grew up, and would be able to help her in the most difficult situations. That seems to be it. The girl really demonstrated determination. She made a decision, and this decision was not only important, but also difficult for her future. The gentleman asked again if this really meant that as soon as dinner was over, the girl immediately went out to look at the beast. He wanted to know what she had decided. The maid confirmed his words. The master noted that if she had wanted to see him so much, she could have done it then, right after the meal, without unnecessary waiting. However, the maid perked up a little, answering that he was worrying too much. He probably had many thoughts about it, but she immediately came to tell His Excellency about what had happened. The gentleman thought for a moment and said that perhaps that was true. In any case, he reminded her that she had to take care of the child. His trust in her was based on her abilities. It was not for nothing that he entrusted her with the care of the child, and the maid understood that she was obliged to carry out all his orders. She nodded and promised that she would not let him down by carrying out all his instructions. This is their family's loyal coachman Choi Young, who can surpass about 20 ordinary coachmen. Although it was a bit impulsive to hire the elite Mary and Golda, the girl could not directly express her desires and needs. She was too shy and unsure of herself to directly say what she needed or wanted. It seemed as if she was always hiding something. At this time, he was looking forward to the delicious food that the chef was supposed to prepare. He was eager to try dishes that would be worthy of a true gourmet, prepared to the highest standard. However, suddenly, someone knocked on the door. He allowed them to enter, and a huge woman burst in. Her appearance clearly disturbed his peace and the calm atmosphere that had reigned until that moment. Apparently, the gentleman told her to pay attention to important matters in the mansion. He knew that the woman was very attentive to everything that was happening in the house and always intervened in time if something required her attention. The woman noticed that he must have called her, since she hadn't been in his room for a long time. The taste of food had improved significantly in recent days, especially when it came to meat. She could clearly see the changes and their improvements. She added that this was certainly the merit of the gentleman. She believed that he had called her not to praise the food, but for some more important matters that required her intervention. The gentleman noted with some surprise that she already knew his daughter was coming home. This could mean that she would soon appear and ask for a favor, as had happened before. He was prepared for this. The woman hearing this was surprised and asked when she would be back. Her interest was genuine because she knew how closely his daughter was connected to this house and how her visits always caused excitement. The gentleman smiled and noted that his daughter was incredibly sweet and very happy. He said that he did not know the exact date of her arrival, but he assumed that she would arrive soon and then everything would change again. She had prepared light food suitable for her daughter in advance, but the woman noted that perhaps it was because she was asleep at the time and could not cook for herself, so her help was limited. The gentleman was a little surprised and assumed that it was the sous chef who had prepared it, since he must have the necessary culinary skills for this. But the woman confidently said that it was the lady who had prepared it personally. When he found out it was her, he was very shocked. He did not expect that she could cook such complex and delicious food herself. This changed his opinion about her culinary skills. The woman explained that the meat was so soft and flavorful thanks to a special recipe given by the lady, and it seemed that he really believed that she was the author of this magnificent dish. After these words, the Duke shouted irritably for her to get out. The woman in turn noted that he may have spoken rather harshly, especially before the dishes that the lady was preparing. The gentleman said again that he told her to get out, and it seemed she wanted to lose her job. The woman said that he should try to fire her. He would not find a cook anywhere else who could satisfy every whim. They brought suspicious food, which as it turned out was prepared especially for him. He of course liked it, because it was brought for his pleasure, and he could not refuse this gift. However, he soon realized that it was not quite what he expected. He already felt himself regretting his decision, because the taste left much to be desired, and he knew that he would think about it later. Meanwhile, in her room, Annette was thinking about what else she could sell to somehow improve her situation. She felt that her life could be better if she had more resources. She could no longer return to the past, and that was obvious. Therefore, she needed to think about how to act further, because only ahead could there be a new life. But what would be in it? She did not yet know. She had almost no things to sell. Her entire modest stock was not that valuable, and it was difficult for her to find something that could help in her difficult situation. For several days, she washed herself thoroughly with good soap, and the result was not long in coming. Her hair began to shine, and she felt how her well-being improved, as if she had become a little fresher and lighter. There were people who bought hair to make wigs or use it for medical procedures. Her hair, with its rare green color, could be a valuable commodity, which gave her hope. There was no knock at the door, and Annette thought it was probably a maid who had come to do some business. But when she opened it, her father appeared in front of her, asking what she was doing in her room. The girl replied that she didn't do anything special, and then asked him why he had come. Her gaze was calm, but inside, she was already beginning to wonder what he needed and why he had come. Her father informed her that, as he had said earlier, he was going north. He specified that he planned to leave in 2 days, and perhaps she had something she wanted to tell him before he left. The girl said that she understood him and did not think that this honey is a long time, regardless of upbringing. How far the capital is from here, the road in the north takes at least 10 days. Since he was going to use magical movement, the process would not take long. This would speed up their task, and everything would go according to plan. The girl could calm down. Annette was surprised by his words. She decided to ask him what he meant, and he explained that he and his brother were connected by magic. This connection allowed them to feel each other even at a distance. She understood that he needed some time to prepare. She said that she would be ready. She also mentioned that there would be another boy with them, his older brother's son, 2 years older. Annette believed that the real heroes of this world were men. She thought so because they were the only ones who were initiated into magic from an early age. However, the history of this world was much more complicated. He was raised as a demon, although he looked human. He resembled a real monster, but that did not stop him from being a hero. When his family was killed, he was picked up by a squad of hired killers. They saw unusual abilities in him and decided to take him in. This child became known as Cabal Argo, and his story was as mysterious as his origin. Annetta had to go and calm her older brother down. She also had to mend fences with his older brother's son. He was silent and cruel, so Annetta had to be careful. The girl agreed with his words. However, her father noticed that there was a special atmosphere between the two of them, calm and trusting, which was not the case with other people. Annette noted that there was no need to worry. She would do whatever she was told. She always tried to follow instructions because her trust in her father was boundless. She promised that if she was ordered to smile, she would definitely do it, all for the sake of fulfilling her mission and helping those who need it. The father mentioned that he had something for her. He took out a beautiful necklace and showed it. It was a gift he wanted to give to his daughter, and it was something special for her. Annette was delighted. She felt that the necklace was just for her, and her heart was filled with joy. She did not expect such a gesture from her father, and it was nice. But before thanking him, she asked what the decoration was. Her father replied that he was sure she knew about it. He had allegedly found it along the way, but she did not believe his words. Annette thought it was just another story, and couldn't understand when her father would start telling the truth. He often lied, and she was tired of these fabrications. Her father remarked that he didn't usually give such things, but this time he decided to make an exception. He had indeed found the necklace, and although she had her doubts, she could appreciate its beauty. The girl thanked him and said that she really liked the necklace. She no longer thought about how he found it. What was more important was that it was a gift from her beloved father. She said that the necklace was really beautiful. She put it on right away and thought that it would be great if it was wrapped with a ribbon. This gesture made the gift even more meaningful. The Duke asked Annette if she knew what true power was, and invited her to sit down so he could explain it in detail. She agreed, ready to listen to his explanation. He began his story about the 4 main families that influence the empire. Each of these families has a unique power that maintains the balance in the country and helps in managing its affairs. Once in the family, Annette learned that the power of her lineage lies in greenery. These are abilities that allow them to listen to plants control them and heal wounds, restoring health to people and nature. The family she belonged to had the unique ability to hear plants speak and could use this power to heal, helping both people and nature. It is a gift that serves the entire world. The Argo family, located in the north, controls Azure. Their power lies in the control of water, its purification and restoration. They can bring liquids to perfect transparency, which helps in many areas. This family is able to purify water to a state of crystal purity, turning it into a source of health. However, it is better not to mess with them, especially with the Eastern Igna family, which controls fire. The Igna family in the East is known for their aggressive nature and barbaric behavior. They can control fire, destroying everything in their path. It is better not to enter into conflicts with them, otherwise you can end up in danger. The Igna family has the destructive power of fire, and they are not very friendly. If Annette ever encounters them, she should avoid trying to please and keep her distance. The Duke seemed to be interested not only in family strengths, but also in personal preferences. Annette became curious about who else attracted his attention, besides Lord Alpha of Argo. He noticed that when she was drowning, he gave her seeds, which was part of his ability, which was called the water tree seed. This is an important element of his power, thanks to which she was able to survive. She was shocked to learn that the plants remembered him, and he confirmed it. Without this knowledge, his abilities would have been meaningless. She realized that her dad was truly special. The girl said with admiration that her dad was a real hero, and she was absolutely delighted with all his stories. Her view of the world became brighter thanks to his amazing stories. She thought her dad was just unique, although she could not yet comprehend all the subtleties of his knowledge of herbs and poison that would be useful in everyday life. She learned all this from this eccentric scientist. The girl decided that it was enough to talk, because her father was a real hero. She was proud to be with such a person and believed that he had a special place in her life. She was truly grateful, because if it weren't for the Duke, she would have been simply sold to another scientist. So she wouldn't have ended up in the family she was in now, and her life would have been completely different. Or she would have been taken into the merchant's family, and then everything would have been completely different. She knew she was on the brink of a different fate, and there were many more possibilities in this new life. Although her life was now more troublesome, she felt genuine gratitude. She realized that her life had changed, and she thanked fate for the changes that had occurred, thanks to the Duke. The gentleman noted that in any case, he was very happy for her. He believed that her life in this family was much better than it could be elsewhere, and he was pleased with her happiness. He also noticed the food she had prepared. The girl apologized, saying that the dish was not very good, because she had been greedy and chosen cheap meat for the steak. The gentleman said that it was not that really bothered him, but that she had admitted that she had bought the meat for 100 dirks. He was completely shocked and asked her again if that was really true. The girl confirmed this, adding that she would never make such a mistake again. She apologized, hoping that it would not ruin his opinion of her. He was simply shocked. He could not understand who could afford her such a purchase, and this greatly surprised him. He could not imagine that someone could do this to her. The girl was shocked by his reaction, and he meanwhile said that everything was not so bad. She should not worry because it was not as serious as she thought. The meat was incredibly tasty, and Annette could not resist the desire to eat more. It was so amazing that she wanted to enjoy every piece, the taste of which she could not get enough of. At that moment, the word woman came to his mind, and he thought that he would not find fault with the dish. He decided that the little lady deserved only the best, and there was no point in arguing over trifles. After all this, the Duke said that he had to go. He still had a lot of work to do, and he felt that time was running out, so he decided to hurry. The girl realized that he had to leave, and a little embarrassed, she wished him to be more careful. She knew that he would not be offended by her words, but still she felt a little awkward saying such things. After that, they headed north. The journey was quick, and soon he was able to show her what he had prepared, although she did not yet realize what exactly she was about to see. Annette woke up, washed herself, and changed her clothes. She rubbed her eyes and looked around. Now they were in the north, and everything around was completely different. She was surprised how quickly everything had changed. They reached the north in a matter of minutes. Annette could not believe that it was possible. She stood amazed at how quickly one could get to such a remote place. She looked around and realized that there was nothing there. It looked like a simple teleportation place, nothing more than an empty hallway to move from one place to another. At that moment, Argo entered the room. Seeing Chagall, he could not hide his joy. His face was shining with happiness, and he immediately felt that meeting his friend was something important. He greeted his best friend with joy. Argo was genuinely happy to see Chagall, and this was evident in his mood and the way he eagerly jumped up to him. The gentleman was also glad to meet his brother. When he saw him, his face broke into a smile. He had also been waiting for this meeting and was happy that they finally met again. Argo couldn't resist and immediately rushed to embrace Chagall. Annette stood aside, watching this moment. She felt that it was something very touching and important for both of them. Annette thought there would be only two of them, but then another person appeared. He hugged Chagall with such sincerity that he didn't seem to mind. The whole moment seemed completely natural. Alf Agro stood before her. Annette noticed that he was a friend of Chagall's and was surprised how he could adopt a child. This was an unexpected discovery for her, but she decided not to ask unnecessary questions. Annette approached him, greeted him respectfully, and bowed. Her manner was reserved, but she felt that this was the right moment for such a gesture. It was quite unexpected for her. She took a deep breath to calm down and prepare for the meeting. The nervousness was still there, but she knew that she needed to be ready for something important. The girl introduced herself by her name, Annetta. The gentleman was glad to meet her and noted that she had very good manners, which immediately left a pleasant impression. His words made her a little happy. Annette could not help but admit that there was much of her wise father in her character. She was always proud of it and tried to imitate his best qualities because he was an example for her. Argo, who was nearby, agreed with her words. He emphasized that her father was a real genius, an intelligent and kind person. This opinion seemed to him quite fair and justified. They arrived at the room with the tap, and the girl probably felt tired. She was asked to rest, have breakfast, and gain some strength, because her condition clearly needed rest. Annette's father also approved of her decision to rest. He was surprised to note her agitated expression and thought that it was not so strange since she was always on the move. After a while, they were taken to the dining room, where Annette was amazed by how everything was arranged. The atmosphere and surroundings simply amazed her, and she looked around with pleasure. Annette felt her stomach begin to rumble from hunger, but she was told to sit down for now. She sat down obediently, although she felt that she would soon break down due to hunger, but she tried to be patient. The master, noticing the absence of his son, Cabal, inquired where he was. The maid calmly replied that he would appear soon, and they could continue waiting without worrying. Annette guessed that they were talking about the most important person, and he was supposed to appear soon. She was a little nervous, waiting for this moment, hoping that everything would go well. The gentleman said that his son had not yet fully mastered his manners, but that was no big deal. He thought that for such moments, it was perfectly acceptable to not attach much importance to trifles. Annette smiled and said that everything was fine. She showed that she was not worried about it and tried to act calmly as she always did in new situations. The guy, noticing her nervousness, added with a smile that she probably shouldn't call him Duke. He thought he should be careful with that, but that didn't scare Annette. Annette agreed with his remark. Although she felt a little awkward since it was their first meeting, she still tried to remain calm and not show her uncertainty. Finally, the main character was brought in, but Annette felt a little uneasy when she saw him. Something in his appearance or behavior immediately alerted her, and she even felt a little scared. They brought a whole fried chicken. She's probably a hot spot. Annette paid attention to this guy because she didn't understand why he was eating chicken with his bare hands, and even without cutting it, which seemed strange and a little sloppy. She soon noticed that he threw the chicken aside and realized that he had probably burned his tongue because his reaction was too sudden and painful. This immediately caught her eye. The boy started screaming and hitting the chicken, clearly unable to bear the pain. Annette was completely at a loss, not knowing what to do. She watched him, not understanding how to react to such behavior. He was obviously very angry and upset. Annette guessed that his irritation was caused by the fact that the food was hot. The whole thing seemed strange, because by nature, hot food should be safe. The father tried to intervene and help somehow, but Annette quickly said that everything was fine. At that moment, a piece of chicken accidentally flew into her face, which of course surprised her, but did not upset her. Mr. Cabal, seeing her reaction, realized that he needed to calm down. Annette told him not to worry and to let the guy come to his senses a little. She knew that after such emotions, you just need to give it time. Suddenly, Annette approached the guy and without thinking hugged him. It was her way of comforting him, showing support. At first he was confused and even angry, but gradually his anger began to go away. When the boy calmed down, Annette smiled and said that he was a good boy and praised him for not giving up. These were simple but sincere words that helped him feel better. In response, the boy was a little embarrassed, not expecting this from Annette. His face turned red, and she, seeing his reaction, smiled even wider. This was the moment when he began to perceive her actions differently. Annette, noticing his confusion, took the bread and handed it to him, saying that it was his reward. It was her simple but unusual expression of gratitude for his patience. At first, the guy was completely shocked that she offered him bread, but soon he liked this unexpected gesture. The bread turned out to be delicious, and he happily accepted it despite his initial reaction. Annette was shocked when he grabbed the bread and started eating. She didn't expect him to react so quickly, but apparently he was really hungry and was ready to enjoy the food despite everything. The bread that Cabal Argo always ate before was hard and tasteless, which he did not like. But the bread that Annette offered was completely different, soft and pleasant to the taste which he really liked. The book revealed useful information based on memories which allowed for a better understanding of what was happening. This knowledge was like a bright beacon that helped to understand situations. It would have been much more convenient if they had warned her about this in advance, but instead, the girl simply sighed, realizing that she would now have to act according to the circumstances. The father was truly shocked to see his son Cabal sitting so calmly and quietly at the table eating. His silence was surprising because usually he was more active and noisy. The girl thought that it should be easy for him to obey. She was sure that he, like a little cloud, would obey her without unnecessary questions because her words had power. So she said that they could now begin their meal. With her small gesture, everyone seated could continue, and she felt a little more confident in control of the situation. The gentleman, hearing her words, was delighted. He gratefully agreed and expressed his appreciation for her guidance. He was clearly pleased with her attention and care for details. However, despite her agreement, she had to literally feed him with a spoon because he did not want to eat on his own. It seemed that without her help, he could not continue eating until she offered him meat. Phew, she was tired. Her arms were starting to ache from the constant effort. She lost count of how many times she had to feed him, but she knew her care was important. She had hoped that after dinner, she would have time to rest, but the reality was different. Expectations were not met, and the work continued demanding her attention and effort. The girl noticed him hiding behind a bush and watching her. He was getting closer and closer to her, and his behavior was becoming more and more noticeable, especially when he followed her to the library. This behavior from the heir of the Argo family was unusual. He had always been modest and reserved, and now following her, he showed traits that were rare for his family. She couldn't understand where the guards had gone. The thought flashed through her mind that perhaps the maid was looking for him, because guys were so fickle and secretive. It was all very strange and confusing for her. She called him to her, and suddenly, he appeared crawling out from behind the bushes. He appeared as if from nowhere quietly, as if he had not been there. The whole scene was so unexpected. The girl extended her hand to him, asking him to take it. She didn't expect him to think long, and that was important, because her request was sincere and meaningful at that moment. Although he clearly showed no emotion, it was obvious even without deep thought. He did not hide his indifference. His face remained calm, as did his behavior. Cabal Argo was trained not to show emotion that was obvious. He was a master at remaining calm in any situation, and his face always remained impassive and neutral. She couldn't say for sure that her mistress was right. Everything was in a tangle in her head, because the voice that appeared was alarming and kept repeating warnings, making her doubt her decisions. She took his hand, feeling her fingers brush against his rough skin. It was an unexpected abruptness, and despite the fact that he seemed like a child to her, she began to perceive him as a grown man. Even though her life was limited, she still continued to strive for something more. This feeling did not leave her, and although she could not change anything, the inner desire for knowledge remained alive. If she could survive and hold out, she could gain the support of the powerful Aubrey family. This support might guarantee her a quiet life for the rest of her days, but there were too many unknowns. The same voice that had predicted that Aubrey's family would be on the brink of disaster was playing in her head again. It was telling her that her wife's death would be the beginning of a chain of tragedies that would soon begin to unfold. The voice confirmed once again that the Duchess would indeed die. This was not just a rumor, but reality, and everything was predetermined. This event would open the way to chaos, which was inevitable. Even her older brother, who ended up on the street, would suffer. This fact left no doubt. His fate was also decided. Everything that happened was part of a great tragedy that no one could avoid. The heroine Shakina Aubrey will be at the forefront of this world. She will be the central figure, and it is her life that will determine the future. Her fate that will decide everything that happens next. Shakina Aubrey. She was truly amazing. The girl they adopted was accepted into the family so quickly. It was an incredibly touching moment. Not only did she adapt to her new life, but she quickly took over the management of the duchy. Her actions were smart and decisive. The Duke, on the other hand, remained a father filled with boundless love for her. Suddenly, memories of old notes appeared in her mind. She remembered the name of the child who was going to be adopted instead of her. This thought of the past did not give her peace, but she decided that it did not matter. After thinking about it, She realized that there was no point in going into these thoughts. She was not a blood relative anyway. But despite this, her relationship with them had become important and close to her. The boy looked at her with bewilderment, not understanding what was happening. She decided that there was no need to worry about it, because everything that was happening around her did not matter much. She was ready to move on. Annette decided to tell Cabal that what she was looking for was not here. She suggested that he leave this place because they had not found anything useful. There was no longer any doubt in her eyes. She was ready to move forward. Cabal pointed to the other side, and Annette noticed his gesture. It was quite unexpected, but she followed his directions, realizing that they had to move on to look for new opportunities. At that moment, something caught her attention. She noticed something heavy falling on Cabal, which immediately made her anxious. She knew she couldn't let him get hurt. Without thinking, she shouted at him to run quickly to her. A moment later, she managed to put herself in front of him and protect him from falling. She felt relief when she realized that he was safe and unaffected by the fall. Annette breathed a sigh of relief, glad that Cabal was okay. She was grateful to fate for having been able to prevent the disaster in time. Now she could calm down a little. However, it seemed that Annette herself had slightly overestimated her strength. She twisted her leg slightly, feeling a sharp pain. It was minor but still unpleasant. She tried not to show that she was bothered. At that moment, the Duke entered the room with one of the servants. They looked at her and Cabal in surprise. The Duke immediately noticed the change in their relationship, and now he understood that she was no longer just a stranger. Argo was in complete shock when he saw what was happening. Worried and stunned, he started calling out to his son, trying to figure out what had happened and how quickly he could resolve the situation. His voice was worried and trembling with worry. The girl standing next to him felt relieved to know that the boy was not hurt. She was glad that there were no serious injuries. Her face immediately filled with relief because she was afraid for him. At that moment, her father approached her. The girl was surprised when he addressed her only now, although she expected him to be there from the very beginning. He looked worried, and there was anxiety in his eyes. He tried to say something, but the girl noticed that his words were not directed at her. However, she was glad that Cabal was okay. She saw that he didn't seem to be hurt at all, which gave her confidence. The girl felt her heart clench and immediately apologized for bringing him here without permission. She began to understand that she could have acted differently, but nothing could be changed. As she stood up, she thought that she should have watched him more closely to avoid unpleasant situations. The girl felt that her actions could have been more careful and reasonable. She knew that if she had been more careful, things might have turned out differently, but she immediately heard that her words made no sense and was told that was enough. This phrase was enough to stop her self-digging. The girl felt that he was very angry. She could not understand what else she had done wrong. This added even more uncertainty, and she tried to find an explanation for what caused his anger. At that moment, she saw her father approach her and take her leg in his hands. He did so with obvious concern, as if he was trying to figure out what had happened and why she was in such a state. The girl tried to calm him down, saying that she was actually fine. She tried to convince him that her condition did not require unnecessary worries. However, her father could not believe that everything was really that simple. The girl felt that all this happened because of her stupid mistakes. She noted that it could have been corrected if she had acted differently. Her words sounded genuinely hurt that everything had turned out this way. She decided that it would be enough to just take a day off. She asked for forgiveness for what had happened, hoping that this would help her to fix the situation and bring peace back into their relationship. The gentleman, clearly perplexed, asked her again if he really had that expression on his face, as if he expected her to apologize. His question made her feel even more awkward and want to do everything right. The girl was completely shocked by his words. He said that it was time for them to go to the room, and it sounded like a command. Her heart began to beat wildly, and she, not knowing what to say, obeyed him. He picked her up and noticed that she was very stubborn. He was surprised by her resilience, because she continued to resist and did not ask for help despite her injury. He couldn't understand how she could walk with her leg like that. The pain was visible in her eyes, but she seemed to ignore it and kept moving, which confused him. The girl said that she did not want to talk about her pain and cause inconvenience. She assured him that everything was fine. She did not even expect that Duke Aubrey would decide to hug her, knowing his aversion to dirt. He couldn't believe that she didn't feel any pain, because the wound looked pretty serious. But she confidently replied that she really didn't feel any pain. Having gotten used to it, she learned to endure it and not notice it. He couldn't agree with her opinion. He said that she rather wanted to convince herself that there was no pain. Habit doesn't get rid of pain, it just helps you come to terms with its presence. He said confidently that people learn to endure pain. The girl, however, was puzzled by his words, not understanding how he could know what it was like to endure pain since he had never experienced it. She seemed to have no problems with etiquette. She behaved very calmly, and her manners did not give rise to any comments. She handled herself very well in society. He needed to teach her to ask for help, even if she wasn't used to doing it. She needed to understand that sometimes she needed to let other people help despite her independence. The girl was a little surprised when he asked what he should do with her behavior, because she was the only daughter of the Duke, and absolutely did not know how to ask for help in difficult situations. If she asked for something, she would definitely do it. The girl was sure that her requests would always be fulfilled if she decided to voice them. She could be a refined and elegant noble lady, admired by everyone, or a mischievous girl, disturbing the peace and causing a fuss. It was in her nature. His father agreed with his words, noting that she could indeed be a troublemaker at times. Sometimes she would throw real tantrums, and this caused inconvenience to everyone. The girl was completely shocked by his remark. She said that people talk about her as a wonderful genius, but with age a person changes, and sometimes being capricious is just a part of growing up. The girl said that if her character suddenly changed, she would become even weirder and crazier. She thought that changes in herself would only make her weirdness worse in the eyes of others. She couldn't understand why his preferences had changed so suddenly and what was going on. It all confused her, and she couldn't find a logical explanation for what was happening. The father noticed that no one would dare to judge her and advised her not to be shy anymore and to ask for help when needed. But the girl assured him that she did not need anything at the moment. Her father was surprised by her refusal and told her to think carefully. Then she remembered the little animal that once needed her care and cared for her in return. The little brother's heart was full of love, but he didn't understand what exactly his little sister needed to be happy. He thought that if the princess didn't have her own doll, then everything else was meaningless. But he couldn't guess what the girl really liked. He himself didn't know what she liked, and that confused him. He wanted her joy to be real, not imposed. Deciding to find out, he went to the girl. He decided that this was the only way to find out what she really needed. He was ready to do anything to give her happiness. She came out to him looking at him with curiosity. She asked if he had called her. He noticed that she was thinking for a moment, but she assumed that he had simply gone somewhere and did not pay much attention to it. When she saw 3 different toys in front of her, her eyes lit up. He was happy with her reaction because he hoped that she would be happy with at least one of them. He felt satisfied watching her smile. He wanted the girl to be able to do whatever she wanted now. He was ready to allow her everything so that she could feel free. After all, he was ready to make any sacrifices and efforts for her. He watched her hoping that she would accept his gift and be happy. He was sure that was what she was looking for, but it seemed that she did not even notice that he was trying so hard. It was a shock to his soul when he realized that she didn't seem to care. She didn't show much interest in the toys, even though he had stood in line for a long time to get these rare things. Annette noticed him standing nearby and decided to ask how long he had been there. She felt curious, and her question was involuntarily dictated by this interest. The plan he had been making was about to go wrong. He quickly realized that the situation was getting tense, and to avoid further suspicion, he simply stepped aside a little, hoping that it would not raise questions. The girl assumed he had come to ask about some toy, and despite her naivety, she intuitively sensed that this was exactly what he wanted to talk about. He, on the other hand, realized that he had been found out. Then he, slightly puzzled, said that it was all connected with the processes of falling, but added that perhaps she would be interested in hearing about it. Annette was interested and began to listen to his words. As she picked it up, he thought that maybe he would have to buy something else. A thought flashed through his mind of a cute gift, like a little kitten that she would like. Annette noticed that her brother was older than her, so she didn't think he would be interested in such toys. She was a little shocked by the idea that she would have to choose something for him. However, the guy calmly said that the toy was not for him at all, and that Annette probably did not understand anything about what was really going on. He smiled reservedly, watching her reaction. The girl suddenly realized that she had already been rescued, and it had not occurred to her that there was any other reason why she should be kept here. This was unexpected for her. Her father, noticing her lack of understanding, said that she did not fully understand the situation. In his opinion, she mistakenly believed that treatment was all that was needed to solve the problem. He warned her that if this happened again, the situation would be very unpleasant. She had to be careful, and she had to see it as an honor and a unique opportunity. In fact, all this treatment was aimed at getting rid of all the troubles. But this inner voice did not give her peace, continuing to sound in her head like a reminder of her ignorance. The head of the house's healing abilities were so powerful that they could restore life even to those who were on the verge of death, healing any injuries, both external and internal, without exception. She was amazed by such abilities and admitted her mistake, realizing that it was not worth continuing to insist on her own way. She stopped shouting her doubts and accepted his words. This power could not cure all diseases, but it could heal dead skin and also prolong life if it really could be a cure for all problems. Everything would be much easier if she just took this medicine, which acts as a panacea for many ills. She wouldn't even need to sit in his arms. Everything would get better on its own. Now she realized that he was genuinely worried about her. He had said that she should be more careful next time, but there was concern and a little wariness in those words. But at that moment, she realized that he was not being completely honest with her. Despite this, her leg no longer hurt, and it seemed that her worries were unfounded. But her feelings remained mixed. The father admitted that he could not stand caring for other people's illnesses and treating people. He said this directly without hiding his disgust for this role, despite all his love for his daughter. Even if someone were dying before his eyes, he probably wouldn't interfere. His mercy was limited, and only in rare cases would he help. There was no sentimentality or unnecessary emotion in this, but there was that 1% of people he could help if circumstances were different. And she, despite everything, might be among the few he would reach out to. The girl had previously thought that his actions were determined solely by personal interests. However, now, in her eyes, there was only a 0.5% chance that this was so. Everything was much more complicated. A 5-year contract or any other agreement, regardless of its form, still did not promise simplicity. In this situation, there was no clear understanding of how everything should develop. The most important thing was that she no longer had to be embarrassed to ask for what she wanted. She began to realize that her desires were important, and there was no need to hide them, even if they seemed insignificant. He was the perfect man with money, honor, and external beauty. However, the girl saw that this perfection was collapsing under the weight of her own thoughts. She gave up everything, saying that she did not need anything. He suggested she think of something else, but she considered it empty words. Her mind refused to accept suggestions that had no real value despite his good intentions. The girl sighed, and her father didn't understand why she did it. He thought her leg was hurting again, but she knew the pain was gone, and her sigh was more because the situation was still confusing. She told him that thanks to his help, the pain had gone away, and she was now feeling much better. But despite this, the 5-year contract as before did not allow her to understand exactly what would happen next. One might conclude from such words that she needed to behave better. However, there was another thought hidden behind it. The same researcher who invented the remedy that could help the Duchess was not an ordinary person. First of all, it was necessary to find this researcher in order to understand how his discoveries could affect her life and the lives of those dear to her. After all, this person could become the key to many solutions. It was good that Annette decided to stay one more day. She changed into an outfit suitable for going out. This allowed her to take a step towards unexpected events that could open up new possibilities. She realized that she had a unique opportunity to meet a mad scientist. If she told the Duke about it, he would certainly want to go with her. This was a chance that could not be missed. However, Annette decided that it would be better to get up early and leave unnoticed. Leaving a note near the bed, she hoped that her action would not raise unnecessary questions and would prevent unnecessary conversations. The carriage arrived just in time, and Annette felt relieved. The driver was too curious and asked where she was going. She replied that she needed to see her mother and asked him to take her to the right region. Along the way, Annette explained that her route would lead to a forest. The driver agreed without objection, and soon he dropped her off among the thick trees where she could continue her journey. As the carriage was already moving away, Annette felt grateful. Despite the noisy and somewhat bumpy journey, she was glad that she had reached the right place and did not have to walk. The driver also helped her out of the carriage, as Annette herself could hardly do it on her own. She appreciated his help, even despite the slight awkwardness of the situation. The driver wished her luck in her meeting, and then, after a short farewell, drove away. Annette was left alone, but in her soul there was a feeling of confidence that she had done the right thing in setting out on this journey. She was a little embarrassed, because in this place among the wooden houses, she felt a little alien. She did not want to be perceived as a child or a strange guest, which added a certain awkwardness. There were a lot of weapons around, and rumors were circulating that a mad scientist lived on the outskirts of the village. Annette knew that she would have to go through these dangerous places to get to her goal. The scientist was said to work as a gravedigger, and since people avoided him, his house was always empty. It was a place where no one was seen very often, which only added to the mystery of it all. There was a hut next to the cemetery, and Annette was sure that this was the place she was looking for. Her steps became more determined as she approached this abandoned corner of the village. She asked the locals passing by if this was really Mr. Frick's house, and in response, she heard strange sounds coming from the hut. Annette felt her heart beat faster in surprise. It was especially scary at night, and she knocked on the door again, deciding to make sure that Mr. Freak was really inside. She couldn't be sure without this last clarification. She said that he already had guests, and then slowing her steps a little, she tried to listen, hoping to hear some sounds that could confirm her guess. It can't be helped, she thought, leaving the letter where it was. Just in case, since she couldn't know exactly when she would be able to meet again, she decided to leave her message. She hoped that Mr. Frick would contact her, because it was becoming increasingly difficult to hide her illness, and she could not keep it to herself. The wait was excruciating, but there was no other way. But it was time for her to return, because at the estate, the Duke began asking questions about her disappearance. He had obviously noticed her absence and was wondering where she had been. Annette replied that she was just taking a walk. However, her appearance betrayed her anxiety. She was clearly agitated. The walk did not bring her any peace. On the contrary, she felt even more tense. She explained that she hadn't been naughty, hadn't broken any rules, hadn't done anything dangerous. It had been a walk, nothing more? She tried to reassure the Duke, but there was an underlying worry in her voice. In a sense, of course, it really was just a walk, but only in a sense. Annette couldn't help but think that it was this walk that had led her to these thoughts. She didn't know if he could control his anger. It was obvious that the Duke was hiding something, but she didn't dare ask him directly. Her words could arouse even more suspicion. She noticed that this was the first walk she had ever taken alone. This feeling of freedom was unexpected, and she hoped that next time her father would come with her so that she would not be alone. The Duke sighed heavily. He was already getting tired of communicating with her and firmly told her to simply forget about what had happened. This was his final decision. He noted that it was time to go to the room because his uncle had already begun to wait for them. This was necessary since time did not allow for any more delay. Annette agreed and followed him. When they entered the room, she ate and felt grateful for the food offered. It was what she needed at that moment. When she was about to leave, the gentleman asked her to stay for a minute. He wanted to apologize. This statement stunned the girl, and she asked him again, not believing her ears. Duke Aubrey did say it was his duty to apologize, but the man added that he didn't think the guards and Cabal would be heading her way because of the incident. He heard that Annette had hurt her leg and wanted to know how she was feeling in the conversation. He also mentioned that he might have caused her too much trouble. The girl tried to assure him that she was fine, but her father intervened, saying that they really had enough problems now that they couldn't be solved so easily. Annette was increasingly confused about what was happening to the Duke, not understanding what exactly was bothering him. At this point, he simply laughed, but why was unclear. She couldn't understand why he was laughing, because his behavior was strange. Argo noticed that the Duke had been so abrupt with him for the first time since their first meeting. Yeah, he was too careless. Cabal has such exceptional skills that even his knights have a hard time dealing with them. I should have been more careful. It was probably unpleasant that everything turned out so unexpectedly. And it seems that the situation could have developed completely differently from the start. In fact, he was truly sorry that it all turned out this way. It seemed like his son didn't mean her any harm. And even though his intentions were good, the girl still responded that thanks to her dad, she was okay. The gentleman was grateful for her understanding. He also noticed that Cabal had never shown any interest before, but suddenly he came and started asking about her, which surprised him. It was then that he began to ask if the girl would go with him, and she responded positively, offering her hand, showing that she was ready to go with him. However, before the girl could take his hand, her father stopped her and asked if she was okay, becoming concerned about her condition. Argo, in turn, reassured him that there was no blood flowing and there was no reason to worry. But the father objected that her height and face did not quite match expectations. The father continued to worry that the girl's condition might worsen if she went with him. Argo noticed that there was indeed a strong attachment between them. The girl couldn't understand what was wrong with her, why all this was so important, and why he was so worried about her condition. The gentleman insisted on bringing Cabal. He understood that nothing could be changed otherwise, and it was important that everything happen at the right moment. The girl greeted him, but the boy looked confused and scared, as if he didn't know what to do in such an unusual, intense moment. There was no need to apologize. She told him it was just an accident, and she didn't feel like he was at all to blame. Despite her words, the boy continued to look guilty, as if there was some hidden trace of worry and regret in his eyes. She noticed that he brought her a flower, and was surprised, not expecting such a gesture. It was unexpected and sweet of him. It was said that this flower only bloomed for those whose blood belonged to the Duke's family of Argo, and this added significance to his action. Annetta was deeply touched by his attention, and gratefully called him by name, feeling that this was an important and symbolic moment. The boy asked her name again, and she replied that it was his name, surprised at how sincerely he was interested in such simple things. The girl thought that in this way he probably just wanted to know her name, and she found it very sweet and touching. She told him that her name was Annette, and after these words, the boy immediately rushed to her with a hug, unable to contain his emotions. The Duke became angry again and shouted loudly that he could no longer believe what kind of children had grown up marveling at their carefree behavior in such serious situations. Argo was delighted that his son had finally spoken his first words, and it seemed like a real achievement for the whole family. The Duke began shouting, demanding that the boy immediately remove his hands from his daughter. He quickly added that it was time for them to leave. Everything was clear, and the situation could not tolerate delay. Argo was delighted, a wide smile spread across his face. He expressed his gratitude for the visit, glad that he was able to see them and spend some time together. He then turned to Annette, asking if she would come to visit them again. The girl replied that if she had the opportunity, she would be happy to visit them again. Cabal also approached Annette, saying that they would definitely meet again. The girl promised that she would come, but advised him to study hard and to chat next time. It seemed that Cabal only remembered her name as he repeated it over and over again. Annette only smiled and reminded him of the importance of studying. The main thing is diligence. She assured him that if he worked hard, they would definitely meet, and this would be a good motivation for further success. Afterwards, waving goodbye, she wished good luck to everyone who remained. The atmosphere was warm, and Annetta felt light in her soul. The master also said goodbye to her, but when his son saw her teleport, he exclaimed in surprise. It was unexpected and attracted attention. Annette felt as if she was leaving someone in a difficult situation, as if she were abandoning a small child, which weighed on her a little. A few days later, something even more disturbing than falling off the closet happened. Such an event is very rare, and today seemed to be that day. Everyone was shocked, and the father even began to suspect that Annette had gone mad. His anxiety grew. He could not understand what was happening. As expected, her hair became too noticeable, attracting attention and causing confusion among those around her. It could not go unnoticed. Annetta just started smiling and laughing, not caring about what was happening. Her reaction was unexpected, and she decided to take everything with humor. Finding herself in the spotlight, she realized that her rare green hair was far more valuable than she ever thought. The chimera returned to her. Of course, she immediately reported what happened to the guards, so that they would be aware of what had happened and could take the necessary measures. Most likely, the guards had already begun to gather to sort out the situation. News of this unusual situation spread quickly. The father approached Annette, and looking at her with concern, asked if some person had really offended her. Annetta quickly began to justify herself, saying that it was not at all what everyone thought. She had simply always had long hair, and sometimes it was inconvenient in everyday life. The gentleman looked at her attentively, wondering why she decided to take such a step herself instead of asking someone for help. Was it so difficult for her to say? The girl shrugged and said it was all a matter of mood swings. She just wanted to, that's all. Even she was surprised by this if you think about it. Even her brother Enos was clearly unhappy and angry with her, but Chagall, on the contrary, was strangely silent, which in itself was quite unusual. The father, observing the situation, did not forget to remind his son that it was high time for him to go to class, because time does not wait. However, the guy calmly replied that today's lesson was simply postponed until tomorrow, so there was nothing to worry about. But his father immediately cut him off, telling him not to talk nonsense, and then turning to his sister, Enos said that they would see each other again. Annette frowned, not understanding why her brother had suddenly become so stubborn and irritable. At that moment, her father pointed to a chair and invited her to sit down. But when she sat down, she suddenly felt as if she had sat right on a prickly cactus. She felt so awkward. Her father looked at her carefully and calmly said that it seemed that Annette thought that he really didn't understand why she was starting all this. The girl rolled her eyes and noted with slight irony that her father was of course just a genius. Well, how could it be otherwise? After all, he always knows everything. If Annette did not praise him, she would be in trouble. The Duke made it clear that he understood her desire to defend her boundaries, but his patience was not infinite. He knew that the girl had her own opinion, and he tried to accept it. However, at times, her stubbornness went beyond the limits, and he had to put up with it. But if she continued to neglect herself like this, he would be forced to intervene. If necessary, he would take her upbringing into his own hands and not allow her to behave like this. Annette thought that the situation was not that serious. It was just an unusual creature, but she didn't know how to convince her father that she could take care of him. The father could not understand why she needed to sell her hair to buy this animal, especially since she had no money. It all seemed absurd to him, but Annette couldn't let anyone dictate to her what to do. She still had a lot to do, and she wasn't going to lose her freedom. There was nowhere to retreat. The Duke warned her that if something like this happened again, he would be forced to take action. This was not just empty talk. He was serious. But then he heard his daughter sob. Through her tears, she tried to explain that she just wanted to buy something with her own money. Nothing bad. Then Annette decided to resort to cunning. She smiled sweetly and said that Daddy shouldn't be angry. He doesn't want to fight, does he? She admitted that she had done wrong. The words hurt him, the admission of error, and in that tone touched the Duke more than he had expected. But he didn't allow himself to be moved. He warned her not to even think about solving all her problems with charm. It doesn't always work. Although it seems he really thought she was cute. However, he added that if something happened to her, Mom would be incredibly upset and he would not allow it. Annetta understood his concern perfectly. Then he asked what kind of animal it was that she had decided to buy and why it was so important to her. After all, it didn't even have a scientific name. It seemed that the father had already conducted a small investigation. But Annette didn't lose her head and simply replied that the animal was rare. She had been warned in advance. If anyone reported her to the control inspectorate, she would be arrested immediately. This was not just a warning, but a real threat that could change her whole life. She was threatened that the animal would be taken away from her, and she hoped that the fear of losing it would make him change his mind. But it seems he did not believe it was not afraid. Did not fall for her trick. Annette said she felt too sorry for the little animal languishing in the store's cage. It reminded her of her childhood something important. She lowered her eyes and added that he didn't like animals. However, he only snorted, saying that this was nonsense. She shouldn't talk like that, belittle herself. Next time, she should be more careful and behave properly. Annette sighed with relief. It seemed that everything had worked out, and there would be no punishment. She even allowed herself a short smile, trying not to show her excitement. But her father, looking at her calmly, said that after dinner she should come to him. They would discuss whether it was possible to keep the animal or whether they would have to part with it. When they were alone, he told her that he had something important to tell her. Animals are not only a joy, but also a huge responsibility and sometimes serious problems. Annetta nodded and replied that she understood that perfectly well. She knew that he had started this conversation for a reason, but she didn't yet understand where exactly he was leading. The father continued. Starting next week, she will attend classes. This is not up for discussion. It is a necessity, and he expects her to take it seriously. Besides, he was interested in something important. How did she know about the magic stone? This question was fundamental for him, and he was waiting for an honest answer. He said that he conducted experiments. Magic stones have different powers, but they all melt only at a strictly defined temperature, which is extremely curious. He is confused. How did she even know about this? No one should know such details, especially her. But Annette does not look surprised, as if she has had this information for a long time. The mad scientist, as he was nicknamed for good reason, was famous not only for his experiments with chimeras. Before that, he was engaged in the creation of magical stones, studying their properties and interaction with energy. A total of 987 stones. That was the number Annette somehow knew at what temperature they melted, but she couldn't say it directly. She would simply be considered crazy. So she decided to lie. Calmly and confidently, she said that she had simply guessed. It was the safest way out, so as not to arouse unnecessary suspicion. Mr. Chagall looked at her attentively, noticing that she was making such guesses too easily. He was not used to believing in coincidences, and was not going to ignore this. However, he could not read her thoughts and know exactly what she was hiding. He could only guess, because Annette clearly had no intention of sharing her secrets. They would soon start selling the magic stones, and he was going to show her the contract. Now all he had to do was wait for the moment when they could discuss the terms of the deal. The girl was happy, because finally she would get her share of this. She would like to get 20%, not 10, but she wants to earn money. When she read, she noticed that it was written incorrectly and decided to tell her father about it. Well, the father didn't quite understand what she was talking about. He checked everything and didn't notice anything strange. Annetta noticed that it says here that she gets 10% of the proceeds. Father didn't quite understand where she was leading with this. She pointed out that there was a mistake in this part, but her father repeated that he did not understand. If you look closely, everything will become clear. She showed him where the mistake was and came very close to him. Annetta noticed that another 0 needs to be added there. She noticed how her father smiled, because she was asking to add another 0 to this 1 0. By the way, that store was closed at the request of a certain person. Annetta added that, besides, it would be a huge success, and I think it would be a waste of time. But the father did not understand where she was leading. The girl noted that he would regret it, but since she did not want to accept what he gave her, he had no choice but to give her everything she earned. The girl was shocked. Did he regret it or not? This man practically monopolized a large part of the imperial trade. She suggested renegotiating their contract. If anything happens to her, she will transfer her exclusive distribution rights to the Duke's house. The gentleman asked again if he had heard correctly what she was saying about something possibly happening to her. The girl noted that you never know what might happen. But when she tried to finish writing this point, Father said that this would not happen. But the girl thought that it was still just a waste. If she doesn't develop a cure for the Duchess, they will both die. Whether it is successful or not, she will definitely die. The girl pointed out that he could also include such a clause to insure himself, but the Duke believed that this would not help. Annetta noted that this was excellent. She was offering to sign exactly this kind of contract. She was insisting on it, but she was grateful that he had agreed. The father agreed and said that he would do his part well. And then the girl asked again. The gentleman confirmed this and noted, trying to say that looking at her, he felt as if his daughter had truly returned to life. The Duke noted when he thought so. If she had grown up in safety, perhaps she would have been like our main character. Now this means that the girl is doing well in her role as a daughter. The Duke said that this was indeed the case, and would in any case try the snacks he had bought for her. Come to think of it, she had a lot of work to do, so she'd like to take a trip to space later. The father tried to say something else, but she simply said goodbye to him. He was surprised he didn't understand what it was. The girl didn't understand what she had just done, because she said that she had a lot of things to do, and didn't understand who would believe that. This is very stupid. She must not forget that she was accepted only for the contract. At some point, she really began to believe that they were a real family. She's just a girl playing the role of his daughter. That's the best way to think about it. Then the little animal came up to her. Annetta was delighted she was quite tame when it came to hitting. There is no need to be sad without a reason. Everything is as it should be. She is not a real daughter, but just someone who does her job well. Everything is going according to plan. Now when the synthetic mana stones are discovered, she will receive an invitation. The most influential scientist of the Empire will be recognized as the Scientist of the Year, and the association invites other scientists, the Imperial Association of Scientists, and shares knowledge with them. They call it a conference. I actually wanted it to be a ball, a floor ball, like in the fall, when some crazy guy with synthetic mana stones was chosen to name the academic years. In 2 weeks, the mad scientists will probably complete their development. And despite the fact that the autumn banquet will take place in 2 months, she will present her development in 2 weeks. They will still see how time runs out before their eyes. She decided to think, because this one doesn't have a name yet. Even if she leaves, she hopes that the chimera will live well. She decided to name him Chess, and then he wagged his tail. She gave him such a name so that she could pass any path with ease. And then she noticed something strange. They said that the chimera had some kind of mysterious power, but she wasn't sure it was true. Then she heard someone calling her and turned around. It was her brother, who told her to come with him to eat some goodies. But the girl said that she had already eaten, and she thought they didn't see it. The brother noticed that someone had accidentally said that he didn't want the animal cookies from the capital's most famous bakery, which were sold in a limited edition of only 20 pieces, and asked him to throw them away. He continued to speak, but the girl did not understand what all this verbosity was about. She wondered if she would say that, and he would probably think she was sick. So she said that she agreed. She liked warm milk with lots of honey. The brother said that if that was the case, he would prepare it right now. She could come to her room in about 10 minutes, and the girl said that she understood him. She was going crazy if she thought it was cute. She should have said that she bought them simply because she wanted to eat. It seems she fell in love with this family. She heard such things, and it makes her happy. Moreover, she cannot just stand aside. She must find someone who can figure out the cure for the Duchess. She will find them inventing no matter how long it takes. Again, she acts on her own. The Duke will probably get angry about this. The girl understood that if she asked Chagall Aubrey for help, she knew for sure that he would help her. But this was not certain. If he asks her how she knows this, she will have nothing to answer. If anyone fell victim to the witch's curse, the days to come would only bring more. She wondered if she should tell the man developing the cure that she wanted him to take it. She's at home, so all she has to do is tell the Duke that they helped her before. Then she realized that it was probably time for her to go, because he was probably waiting for her back. She was also wondering how much longer she had to wait. But then the doors opened, and she didn't understand what had happened. The door was opened by her father, who looked at her strangely. Annette didn't quite understand what was happening, and then the Duke started saying something. He said he had something to tell her. He remembered the butler saying that he rated his sentence 5 out of 10 for someone who was adopted to play the role of another person. I find that unpleasant to hear. The words that she is simply a replacement for his daughter are like salt in the wound. Miss is trying to solve everything on her own, just like the Duke in his youth. If Pedro weren't so annoying and talkative, he wouldn't be so worried. The girl is now very worried for no reason. The Duke said that when he looks at her, he feels that his daughter has come back to life. But this does not mean that he equates her with this child sometimes. When he sees other children her age, he has the same thoughts. Annette is her, and that child is this child. The girl smiled. She thought her father liked her. Then the father became embarrassed and said that this was not so. He didn't like anything. She didn't understand what kind of speech this was. It was as if she was standing in the middle of a teenage storm. Annette coughed and said that he was sad when he didn't like anything. Well, the man noted that when he started to like something, it eventually became his weak point. It takes his breath away and eventually it leaves him. So it's better for him not to like anything than for him to suffer from it. The girl understood him and told him to continue to harbor hostility towards her. The Duke asked again what she was talking about, but the girl said that there was no reason, I just suddenly thought of it. Well, it's better if they don't dislike each other too much. It will be easier for them later. Well, they are quite unpleasant to each other, so don't worry too much about it. In 5 years, they will still separate. And there is no way to avoid it, because that is the contract. They do it without words already. The father lowered her eyes and simply looked at her. He's a cold-blooded man. If she stabs him with a knife, he probably won't even bleed. If there really are blue bloods among the aristocrats, then he will definitely be one of them. The girl said that she had to do everything so that she would sit down for her father, who adopted her, and she asks for forgiveness for causing unnecessary concern. She said she would go in first, and then the Duke looked strange. He noticed his son standing behind him and was surprised when he saw him. The boy turned to his father and pointed out that his father had just discriminated against his adopted child. No matter how much he dislikes her, he brought her here himself, so he doesn't understand how his father could do such a thing. The Duke started to say that that was not really the issue, but the girl said that they had better put it aside. He also asked what he meant when he said that he would soon divorce this child. He realized that his son had heard everything and was upset. He had forgotten to mention the 5-year contract. The father said that he didn't need to worry about it. But the guy shouted that he was worried he went to eat snacks with this kid. Father started saying that he was talking about those snacks that someone was going to throw out. The girl heard all this and understood that it was quite natural to feel uncomfortable going out early in the morning to buy them herself. It was quite funny that they were both upset, but they can speak out of acute guilt. She shouted at them that everything is fine. She will eat any food, regardless of whether it is picked up or thrown away. It's all because there were many cases in the shelter when she went hungry for several days.